All right, it is officially 9 o'clock. I say we get this party rolling. Welcome to our State Science Education Coordinating Committee meetings. This is our first for the 17-18 school year. For those who don't know. Okay. So someone on there, if you could mute your mic, I think what's getting is we're getting some feedback from your sound into your mic. Anyway, but for those who don't know me, my name is Ricky Scott. I'm the science specialist here for the Utah State Board of Education. It is my pleasure to work with you here at this meeting. A few points of business before we get started. Obviously, welcome. What I would like to try to do this time, just to kind of help us know who is here and who is not here and who's here digitally and who's here physically. On the PowerPoint, you'll see at the bottom, if you have a computer with you, I'd love for you to all at the same time log into, by the way, if you are here at this building, the guest network should work fine, no problem, but log into the collective meeting notes. You'll see that at the bottom just about every slide today. And if someone comes in late and sits next to you and this isn't up for some reason, let them know how to get into it. So tinyurl.com/SSECC notes 17-10. You'll notice on these notes, the purpose of this again is to help us collectively kind of put together our thoughts as things are happening, as we're having these conversations and discussions, your aha moments, simply what's happening. Go in and type those into these notes together. Right now, you'll notice the very first page. I'll try to keep it scrolling here as well. But what you'll see is at the very top, it says attendance. Please list your name, LEA, and the number of years you've come to SSECC, if you can remember for some of you. A good round number works too. So go ahead and start filling that in, and that'll kind of let us know who is here and who is not here. By way of, also, sorry, with this document, the great thing about this too, that's the bad thing about it. The person to my right here is trying to get his second on, but with everyone using it, that's the great thing about Google Docs is it kind of goes crazy all at the same time. But the purpose of this, again, is for you to also look ahead. I try to do, in the past when I first did this in a meeting, what I tried to do was kind of leave it blank and let people fill in the notes. This time, if you look ahead, you'll see just about everything I'm going to be saying word for word. Not really, I'm not going to be reading it, but it has just about everything you need. So you simply fill in the blanks of what you think is necessary in those areas. Bert, the first update that I really want to talk about is here at the bottom. This time next week, I will be presenting to the Utah State Board of Education's Standards and Assessment Committee to request that we open the review for standards for grades K-5 and 9-12. That is, after waiting almost 2 years, we have permission. We're moving forward. We now are on the agenda. Now, that still is going to be up. It's still going to be up to them to make the decision, obviously, but it is happening. The date of the meeting is again Friday the 13th. I don't know if that's a good thing, but I'm not. We're scientists, so I'm not superstitious. But I don't know exactly when it's going to be, but the time of that meeting is between 9 and 12. I think I'm number 7 on the agenda, and the way they run, I could be any time from 10 to 11 to who knows when. So just so you know, if you would like to be there in attendance for that meeting, that part of that meeting is that after they have a board discussion, it's open to public comment on every single item agenda. So if any of you would like to be there to be a part of that open discussion with the board, you are definitely welcome to do so. No reservation or call in early is necessary. Simply be in the room, and they'll say anyone in here in the room want to have a statement or want to say something about this, and you raise your hand and you get to talk. So just so you know, that is available for us. So the proposed action as it's written in the agenda is it is proposed that the Utah State Board of Education approve the opening of the science standards for grades K-5 and 9-12 and begin the USBE standards revision process. So that's hopefully what they will be discussing. So that's our first big update of the meeting. Yeah, can you use your mic?
If we wanted to be here to talk, what time would we need to be here?
So because we're 7 on the agenda, again, it's a hard, I would say if you're here by 9:30 would probably be safe. But at the same time, it may not come up until 10:30. So it just depends. It just goes in order.
Okay.
No, it's not. Sorry. So this is a Friday meeting. The board also made a change. So what it used to be is Thursday were committee meetings, and the very next day on Friday they would meet as a full board and then make final approval on the action. This time they've made the change. They want to have some time between committee meetings and full board meetings. So committee meetings now are happening on the Friday. So it's not it's not just an open public comment. It's simply agenda item by agenda item by agenda item. So there's no actual time that we've been given. It's simply be there and yeah.
So we would speak, they would ask us to speak after you get done?
Usually after the presentation is finished, after they've had some discussion, then they open it up for public comment. It's generally the order of things. Again, if you are just joining us, don't be, if you want to and you see an empty seat, join us on the table. It just makes it, when you're back there and you try to make a comment, it's hard for us to hear you because the microphones don't reach back that far. Any other questions regarding our update? Okay, I don't know what that was. So without other questions, then I guess we're going to move forward in our agenda. What I want to do now is turn some time over to Travis Rawlings and Diana Sudreth. They've been meeting with content specialists from districts in these kind of meetings for the past several weeks. They're going to be talking specifically about educator licensing and possible changes that are coming your way and getting some feedback. So,
what microphone would you like us to use? Okay, there we go. I don't like to sit down though, so you can sit down. Okay. I'm not going to stand here either, so I'm going to stand over here. Sorry. So what we're talking about today is the state board looking at the redesign of Utah educator licensing. How many of you in this room were aware that the state board has been looking at this? Oh, good. There's a few of you. I was kind of hoping everybody would raise their hand, but you know. So the first thing that we often have to talk about whenever we talk about this subject is, why is the board doing this? What was the motivation? What was going on? What happened that we were starting to have this conversation? And so the first thing we want to make sure you're aware of is that the board set some goals. And so this is what they were looking at when they were trying to look at licensing. And the first one was to eliminate bureaucracy. The licensing system that we have now, we've had for 30 years or so, and it keeps getting patched. And it gets patched over and over and over until the point of it's such a big and complex system, it's become unmanageable. And there are things that we do, aspects of bureaucracy that may have made sense at one point, but maybe they don't make sense anymore. So that was the first goal, to try to eliminate any of the bureaucracy that was getting in the way. The second was to establish a system that is fair to educators. This task force, or this proposal, these discussions, really came out of last August, when the board, you may or may not have heard, the board created the APT program, the Academic Pathway to Teaching. And in so doing, they kind of realized that they put a Band-Aid on a gaping trauma wound. There were all kinds of problems, and they were trying to solve one little problem, and they realized the whole system needed to be looked at. And by doing so, they also realized that they had created a system that was inconsistent. We have all these different licenses, and all of them have different requirements and different pathways and different expectations. And so the board was like, that's not what we want. What we want is a licensing system that's fair to all educators, but at the same time being fair to all students, ensuring that students have access to quality teachers. We want a fair system of licensing. And the third one was to increase the flexibility needed to attract teachers. We know that there are many factors that go into the recruitment and retention of teachers, but we also know that there were certain aspects of the licensing rules that were barriers, that were in the way. Now, as you talk about this, you notice it says increase flexibility. It doesn't say lower standards. When we talk about increasing flexibility, what the board is talking about is having multiple ways of meeting the same standard. Saying, look, here is the standard that you need to have to be a teacher, but there should be multiple ways to show that you meet that standard. That's what they mean by flexibility. And then finally, the last one is just like in the K-12 where we're focusing on competency and outcomes, the board wanted to do the same with licensing. Rather than focusing on inputs and requirements coming into a person, but rather what they can demonstrate, what competencies can they demonstrate. So those were the goals that the board was really looking at. Now, for those of you that are familiar with the licensing system, this may not be too shocking, but those aren't. Every single one of these circles here represents a different type of licensing, and each one has their own rules, their own requirements, and it's a mess. And that's not even all of them, okay? We just like ran out of room on the slide, or we could have put about 5 more. So that's the system that has been created because, again, we started with a system and it's been patched over and over and over for 30 years, and it's just become this big conglomeration of mess and junk, quite frankly. So before we get going, though, as part of our conversation, we do have to have a little bit of vocabulary to make sure that we can talk about things in the same way. So if you're familiar with these, this will be quick. If you're not, just let me go over them very quickly. A license is your permission to provide services in a school. Every educator in Utah either has or does not have a license. There's only one. You either have it or you don't. The license area is what is a part of that license that authorizes you to teach in a particular setting or to work in a particular setting. So secondary versus elementary versus school counselor versus administration. Okay, those are different license areas. And then finally, there's another level where we talk about endorsements. For secondary settings, endorsements typically mean a subject area expertise, permission to teach in a specific subject. But it also can mean a set of specific skills. For example, the elementary math endorsement or the ESL endorsement. Those are endorsements that represent a specific set of skills and competencies. Okay. So that's just some vocabulary we're going to use. So when we talk about licenses, license areas, and endorsements, we just got to make sure we can keep those three things straight. Okay, this is just a little bit of information. So here's the board task force that's been working. They actually have completed their work now as of August, but they worked for about a year. There were the 6 board members who were the most recent members of the team. And as they looked at this, they really realized that there was a lot to this, that this was not a simple solution that we could, just, we'll figure this out in 2 months and then we'll be done. It wasn't that way, and they realized that. And so they took their time. They met with stakeholders. From September 2016 all the way to May of 2016, they met with different groups. They met with universities, with parents, with teacher associations. They met with all kinds of people as they were talking about big ideas and basically saying, what is this licensing structure that we should have? Just trying to get a general idea for that. And then so this past summer, they started to kind of finalize some of their work, and they directed staff to work with some focus groups. So this last July, we had 12 2-hour meetings with focus groups. Now, not all of these focus groups were created equal. Some of them had 2 people in them, and some of them had 30 people in them. Okay, so you can see who we met with. We met with all those types of individuals. We did some up in the northern area of the state. We did some in the southern area of the state, and collected a lot of information and got feedback. And so what we're going to talk about now is the actual proposal that the task force has created. It's the general idea of what they want licensing to be. And so that's what we're going to talk about now. First, most educators, the idea is we'll have one of 2 types of licenses. Instead of having all those 20 bubbles, we're going to have 2 licenses. There is an associate educator license, which is a license that is issued to an individual who is working to meet the standard for a professional license. So they're on their way to a professional license. The professional license is simply defined as an individual that has met all the standards established by the board for being a teacher or educator, if you want to think of it that way. But those are the two major buckets. And instead of having these 20 different things, you're either a professional teacher or you're becoming one. Those are the two. That's what most teachers will fall into. We'll come back to this in just a minute, but just keep thinking about that. The third one, because I think I said 3 tiers, they created a 3-tier system, is an LEA-specific license. Now, any of you that know anything about licensing right now, don't equate this. This is not the same as, like, we actually have an LEA-specific license right now. That's not what this is. The LEA-specific license is an effort for the board to how they deal with the fact that no matter what system they create, someone also always seems to fall outside of it. The reason we have a system that's been patched over and over and over again, quite frankly, is because some unique situation came up and that person fell outside of the licensing rules, and the legislature and the board felt that they should have a license, so they patched the system. And then when the next person came up, they patched it again, and so on and so on. And so they understand that no matter what kind of system they create, they cannot account for everything. So the idea was that this type of license, an LEA-specific license, is a license that's requested by the local school board, that is approved by the local school board in a public meeting to say, yes, we are, as an elected public school board, we're okay with this person providing instruction in our schools. And the only state requirement would be to complete a background check. So that way the state board is still involved with this. And these licensors are also limited. So your local school board votes to do this. They can only do this in their authority. You know, they can't issue a license that would go somewhere else. So that's the idea there. Now, think about that for a minute, because that probably elicits a lot of questions. And we're going to get into a question and answer period, and we're going to start having a discussion and talking about this. So if you're in the back, we probably need to try to get them on a microphone somehow. But don't be surprised about one thing. If you ask a really good question, and I say, I don't know, what do you think? I really want to know what you think. Because what we've talked about is a general overview. And those of you that know anything about licensing, the devil is always in the details. The details still need to be worked out. Okay? So as we have this discussion, don't be surprised if I say that. So what are your thoughts? What are your questions that you have as you've seen just this idea of the 3 licenses? Yes, sir.
My question is that if a board says, okay, you can teach biology, and so that person, I take it at that point, they no longer have to pursue classes or anything other than your different levels, level 1, level 2. If that person should then move to a different school district, is that null and void and they have to get it reapproved by the new school district?
You are exactly correct, because that first school board has authority only within their district. So if they did try to go somewhere else, the new board would have to approve that. Yes. Oh, come on. You got to have more questions than that. Let's go over here and then we'll come back here.
I was just wondering what the process is. Once the school board has approved that, do we send that information to the state, or how do we designate that person?
I don't know. What do you think? That's a level of detail we haven't thought about. What do you think?
I would say it would be good for you guys to get that information and documentation that says that has been done.
So it's still important for the state board to verify or to assure that that has been done, something like that. Okay, yeah, I can go for that. We had a question in the back.
So I don't really see the LEA-specific license being an issue in the larger school districts. My concern is at the charter school level and maybe some of the smaller school districts, is it going to foster effective teachers or less qualified teachers more?
That's a great question. So as a state board, if we have a responsibility to try to prevent that, how would we do that?
Yeah, I'll be a little more blunt with it. I think it's the watering down of the quality of our teachers in this state. And it's an easy out for a state school board to approve something like this, because we do have a lot of small school districts that are having a difficult time getting qualified people. This, to me, is whitewashing and saying, well, you just do what you want. And as a science committee, curriculum committee, for us to go along with something like this, I feel would be a real detriment to our profession.
So what's your feedback there? Are you saying that type of license shouldn't exist? What kind of checks and balances should it have? What are you talking about?
I feel it should be state controlled and not LEA.
So I'm sorry if I feel like I'm pushing back, but I'm trying to pull out what you want. So the state board should be reviewing the credentials and individuals that are teaching in these schools.
Absolutely. Science teachers should be coming through Ricky's office, and it should be a checklist of criteria that is standardized across the state to maintain a level of quality and competence in this state.
Okay. So my final question that I'd like to get, because again, I'm trying to get information from you. Are you aware that there's currently about 5 different ways for districts to already do that?
Yes.
Okay, so just checking. I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah,
okay.
By the way, my wife's UEA president, so I have a little vested interest in this. Yes, some of those need to be eliminated. I agree with you. There's been stopgap measures over the years, and a part of it is that Utah faces a fundamental problem. We can't get educators. This, in my view, is not the solution, and the simplification of this process partly is to allow one aspect of the multi-tiered that has existed to persist that, in my view, is a degradation of our profession.
Okay, that's fair. Let's go here and then we'll go into the back.
I just wanted to clarify that if an LEA approves a teacher along these guidelines, do they then need to continue through and meet the professional educator standards? Is that like the next step? Is it just in general?
Under the current model that has been described, the associate educator license would have to eventually move to professional. The LEA specific would not. So if it doesn't, what should be the checks and balances on that? Let's go back into the back.
So I'm not going to say this correctly, but I believe that we have to be a little more inventive in this process. I have 2 instructors that I just hired from Hill Air Force Base with PhDs to teach my engineering classes because I can't find science teachers. So whatever we're doing now, I'm not sure that it's working too well when I look at how well across the board we're doing in our sciences. So I think we need to have a little more creative approach to how we're enticing people to become science teachers. I have PhDs that are going through this professional education license that are more than competently qualified. But some of them just didn't necessarily go to school to be a science teacher. So it's taking a little longer, or there's different avenues. I would rather have that person teaching my engineering students who has an engineering degree and has been working in the field for 30 years than someone who has got to jump through the hoops. So the quality of instruction is not indicative of this standardized process. And in order for us to improve our science phenomenizing of what we're trying to do with all of our courses and how we're trying to engage students, I think we might want to think about a little different approach and be a little more open to new and different ideas.
Okay, let's do a couple more just general questions here, and then we'll get into some specific questions that we actually want to get information from you. Any other ideas, thoughts percolating as you think about this? Yeah.
If I may again, I think at some point in time you either trust the LEAs or you don't.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're going to have an LEA that's untrustworthy, then you need to fix how LEAs are set up. I think that being an out-of-state person coming in, Utah has made it incredibly difficult for me and others who were master teachers, qualified to master's degrees, but I took exit tests in Texas. In addition to taking about a 25% pay cut, you come here, and I've already taken 5 college classes, and I'm enrolled for my 6th. And it's okay because I enjoy the classes, but the point is, this has been a 4-year-long process, and I'm not there yet. I've got an extension on an SAEP. And so, you know, I've taught. I'm a former teacher of the year. I've sat on think tanks. I had the highest scores in the state, which is impressive in Texas in the Title I school. And I'm not saying I want a pat on the back, but what I'm saying is, gosh, you've made it difficult for me to teach here. And, you know, I'm also a retired engineer, so I have other options. I want to teach, but boy, do you make it difficult for me and others. A biology teacher from California comes here and can't teach biology because she needs someone decided she needs this one college class. Maybe let her teach biology, see what her test scores are like, see what the feedback is, and, you know, put her on probation. Do something like that. I think a probationary sort of thing may be worthwhile, and perhaps when the LEAs approve somebody, then just say, what is your, just let us know why. We're not saying that it's not going to be approved, but just let us know, like, we couldn't find anybody, or we feel that this person has enough experience. And I think that way you could satisfy those, as opposed to just making an assumption that the charter schools, which is an amazing number in Utah, don't know what they're doing.
Out of state is a recurring theme that we have heard in these meetings. That is definitely something that the board is interested in looking at. So thank you for bringing that up. All right, I really want to move on because I want to give you some pointed questions to really think about. I'm sorry about that. So we're going to skip a couple of these and come back to these. So this one here. So these questions. These licenses right now that we've been talking about, they're just names, they're just titles. What do they mean? So that's one of the details that we have to talk about. And now the board has some ideas, but we want to know what your ideas are. So what requirements should exist before you get an associate license? What requirements should be met? What should exist before you get a professional license? And what requirements should exist for an LEA specific? Now, the first one that nobody disagrees with is a background check through the State Board of Education. You know, for all 3 of those. Nobody argues with that one. So what else should there be? And you can pick any of these 3 you want. What should be a requirement for one of those things?
I think.
Okay.
I think there are a lot of brilliant minds, absolutely, and there are a lot of brilliant people who we would love to have in our classrooms. But coming from the classroom and seeing junior high students at their best and at their worst, and seeing high school students at their best and at their worst, and elementary students, there has to be something in place in the realm of classroom management that they've got the with-itness and they've got the support, that they're not just thrown to the wolves, that they're able to have those scaffolds that help them say, oh, if I run into this type of problem with my students, this is how I can manage it. Because I can have the most brilliant mind, but it means nothing if I cannot control my classroom.
Okay. So as a requirement for all 3 of these, or for a specific one, what are you talking about?
All of them.
Okay, so let's think of it as, and that's fair, that an associate leads to a professional. So if I require it for associate, I don't need to require it for professional, you know, just for norms. But then LEA specific, okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
What else? Oh, let's go here and then we'll go here and then here.
I would like.
You were on.
There. I would like to see us come up with a creative way of, instead of just using the Praxis as to me, it's kind of a hoop to jump through, and some teachers cannot pass those. And if there was an alternate way for them to show competency, I think that would help us. And so it's like the sage, not all things can be judged through a test.
Okay, I'm going to follow up. So if we're not going to use the Praxis, what other, or if we do, what are some other options? Do you have any ideas?
I haven't worried about any
Well,
ideas
exactly.
that it wasn't possible, but I think if we open that up to actually research that and see, maybe some states are doing something that's unique and we could use, but I agree that so far we've had a little teeny Band-Aid that we put on things and judge people, and I would like an alternative way of allowing them to reach that.
Thank you.
It seems to me that you can have all the content knowledge in the world, but if you don't have an understanding of instructional design and assessment, you're not going to get that across well to the students. It also, in coaching teachers, one of the big things I've noticed, if a teacher does have good instructional strategies, your classroom management issues are way less. That a lot of how you design instruction takes care of a lot of the classroom management issues. So I think somehow there has to be a way for those teachers to get pedagogy in how do I design and instruct, and how do I formatively assess to see where I go next.
Okay. Before we go on to more questions, I wanted to clarify something because I realized I forgot to say something. Diana should have thrown a rock at me or something. So in terms of what the board is thinking about with these things, just so you're aware, so the associate license, that license that's leading to someone, that would be an ARL, an APT, a student teacher, an intern. All of those things would fall into the associate license bucket. People who have met the standards, such as most level 1 teachers, level 2 teachers, level 3 teachers, those would be the professional educator license. And finally, LEA specific would be like things like eminence, like letters of authorization, if you know what those things are. Okay. Sorry, I did not clarify that earlier. Let's go over here first.
So I feel like one of the, especially for the associate license, one of the things that we're facing is just not having any classroom experience at all before they're thrown to the wolves. And so I feel like if a requirement would be to give them at least a minimum experience in a classroom with a teacher that has got some experience, so they can actually see and feel and experience what a classroom is like. A lot of times those teachers do not have that experience, and we've had stories of teachers that made a half hour and are in the corner crying in the faculty lounge, and I'm not exaggerating.
Yep.
And so to be able to give them that experience before they even attempt any other alternative licensures, to give them that experience, I think there should be that minimum requirement to feel and experience a classroom. And I don't know what that minimum is like. Is it 5 weeks, 6 weeks, 10 weeks? I don't know, but I think that should be something we address right off the bat.
Okay, thank you. There was one in the back. Yeah.
So we had the same discussion with teachers and
Yes, we did.
But I really liked kind of and I would like the science people's opinion on this, because there is this need of, it's one thing to know their content, but that doesn't mean you can teach, right? That doesn't mean you can engage students, connect with students, assess appropriately. So there was an idea that, yes, they have their degree and they can take their Praxis, so they show content knowledge. But after, they have so much time to take kind of boot camp classes to provide support. So, even teachers that come through the regular teacher programs, depending on their program, if they haven't spent a lot of time in the classroom through their program, it's still, they go into student teaching and it's sink or swim. But until you're in a classroom and have something to work with and have a perspective and frame of reference, sometimes some pedagogy classes aren't as useful as they could be. And so the idea that we kind of were talking about briefly is that there's these boot camp courses instructional design, assessment, mapping, pacing, whatever it may be, even content classes, if needed, specific to the core they happen to be teaching. And that provides kind of a support system, and it provides them an opportunity to collaborate with teachers across the state. It provides opportunities to build a support network of their own, not just in their school, but outside of their school. I thought it was a really good idea to provide support and take some of the pressure off of the LEAs, so there's a consistent training and support. So the LEAs would help the state, but if you depend on the LEAs to provide the training, like right now the APT requires, in one district they may be required to do a lot more than another district, and I don't know about charter schools. If they're a district charter, then they have that support. If they're not, then they only have so many resources as well to provide that support and training.
That's a very good point, and I think that's one of the reasons. When we talked about the goals of the state board, they were really focused on competencies rather than inputs. So rather than saying, here's a checklist of requirements that you must do, because that's an input, here's a list of things that you must be able to show you can do, which is a competency. And those are two different things. One more thing before I go to more questions. One of the other things that the board has talked about, kind of like letting you into some more information, just little pieces at a time. The primary gauge for an associate license is likely content knowledge. The primary gateway for a professional license is pedagogical knowledge. That's how they're thinking about it, that I can show my minimum level of content knowledge here, and I know my content, I maybe have a little bit of pedagogy, as has been mentioned, but then here is where I have to show I really do know what I'm doing before I get that professional license. That's how they're thinking about it. Let's go back in the back first, then we'll come back up here. Yeah, go ahead.
So I live in Park City, and I've actually personally experienced several of the people that are an APT, but they're retired engineers that have come into the classroom, and we have hired roughly about 8 to 10 of them over the past 3 years. 2 survived. So what you're talking about with this associates coming in with the competency, there are 2 issues that really arise that, A, they're not going to survive, and then secondly, it all of a sudden becomes a burden on the master teachers who are there. And I can cite specific examples in Park City where the rest of the department had to pick up the load to carry this person, these people through, and that's unfair. I really feel that what the state of Utah should be looking at, even though we are the lowest funded state in the country, a small investment that would stopgap some of this problem is to give money to LEAs for master teachers to reduce their teaching load, and these folks that are coming in as associate, give them a reduced teaching load and pair them and allow quality time to work together. And I feel it'd be a very small investment on the part of the state, and it would ensure success of getting these associates to a place where they can make it to a fully licensed professional.
And that's some very good points. One thing to bear in mind is, too, that in this effort, you'll notice there's no level 1, level 2 requirements here. And there's a reason for that. When the board has been looking at this, they really wanted to separate employment from licensing. That pay is the purview of the district or the charter school you work in. That excuse me, the mentoring and mentoring is essential for retention. We know that. That's been researched. We know that. But ultimately, licensing, they did not feel was the area to enforce that was an employment issue, that mentoring and retention is an employment issue. And so that's one of the things they've been thinking about, because what you described is actually a great idea. I love it. Is that something that should be a part of the licensing system, or should it just be other requirements? I don't know. That's great points. Let's go here. Then I think there was some others over here. Yeah.
Yes, I had a question on how long they would be allowed to have an associate license. And then I understand there hasn't been a lot of discussion on what's going to happen to the EYE program and mentoring. I agree that would be great to be able to have a master teacher, a mentor, but to me that would be very costly. Be costly for our district because all our schools are so far apart. But I think that's something that could be looked at to actually help these people coming in with an associate license receive the training and the help and the skills that they need. So
I'm going to ask you a question. How long should they be able to be on an associate license? Because you asked me that question.
Yeah, I know. And that's a hard one because depending on what the requirements are, if we set those requirements so high, like this gentleman, he'll have a master's but still be working on it 4 years down the line. And so I think we need to reduce the requirements, but really pinpoint what those are so that it is achievable for someone working full-time to be able to get the training they need within.
So what we've discussed, I think you're right. What we've discussed is, unlike right now, so like the level 1 has a minimum. The level 1 to level 2 has a minimum of 3 years. That's an input. And so what we've been looking at here is perhaps mirroring the employment law. And that is that you could be an associate educator for 3 years with up to 2 one-year extensions, which is how long you're on provisional when you work with a district or charter school. There were some other questions, though. Let's keep going.
I think that you bring up a valid point with where's the line between licensing and the employment piece. I agree with Charlie's approach. As an intern, I had an amazing mentor teacher, right? And that really helped me flourish as a teacher. I think ultimately with these teachers to avoid we hire all these people and they last a year maybe.
Or 2 weeks.
Or 2 weeks. We have got to set them up for success, just like our students, right? We've got to make sure that with that, if the associate license is you have a degree in the content area that you're teaching, awesome. Here's the support that we have in place to ensure that your license can become a professional license. And I think that those, like that monetary or whatever needs need to be in place for that, and I think that's what we're discussing. That support system has got to be there. For sure.
Let's go right here.
I'm just curious about, you can talk about competency for a professional. Is that going to be state determined and all LEAs are using the same competency measure across the board, the same checklist, or is that going to be, case by case?
Thank you for that excellent segue into the next slide. How does one prove content knowledge? How does one prove pedagogical knowledge? Yes, in the back. Okay.
So, teacher preparation programs that are in place right now, how do those teacher education programs play into this?
Okay.
And support districts. There's a tone maybe districts trying to go out and trying to get their own, or how much can we help?
That's a great question, and so I want to answer that in 2 different ways. And the first is, if I was too subtle before, if a person goes through a traditional program, as part of that program, they will have demonstrated whatever requirements are necessary for a professional educator license. So they'll have completed their program, they'll have their student teaching, their internship, whatever. They will have had the opportunity to demonstrate those competencies and come out with a professional educator license. And the second question is, how do we partner with our universities? And we're actually working with, I'm actually heading a little task force that's trying to work on how do we work with partners and districts and universities. Parker Fossen, who's the dean at UVU, is partnering with me on that. And it's very important because, like you said, some districts feel like they need to go out and do it on their own, and others will reach out to their partnerships. Now, not every district has a natural partner, but if you're anywhere in Utah, you have a university assigned to your geographical area. And so it's reaching out, it's them reaching out to you, and it's you reaching out to them to help support these teachers. And we've also talked about that the support for teachers does not end with student teaching, that those districts and university partnerships should go beyond that, into the mentoring, into the induction, those kind of things. Okay, do we have answers to these questions? So let me give you a couple that we have now and a couple that we're thinking about, and you can either respond to that or come up with your own. So content knowledge, obviously the Praxis is one way of showing that. Maybe having a degree in a subject is another way of showing that. Related degree is where it gets a little bit murky and gray. For pedagogical knowledge, we do not, okay, I'm going to say this. I'm not going to say we, I'm going to say I. I don't believe that the PLT is the right pedagogical measure. I think the Principles in Learning and Teaching Praxis test, it is what it is. I don't think it's the meaningful measure we want. And so what we've been investigating are what are called pedagogical performance assessments. Have any of you ever heard of, there's two primary ones. They're called the EdTPA and the PPAT. They are performance-based assessments. One's Pearson, one's ETS. But essentially, are any of you familiar with either of those? Yeah, that's what I thought. How many of you are familiar with National Board Certification? Okay. The closest analogy we can give you for a performance assessment, such as the EdTPA, is National Board. The idea is that the educator, the person who's taking the assessment, it's over time, they're preparing a lesson, they're talking about the differentiation they're going to do, accommodations for specific students, they're planning this lesson, they videotape the lesson, they go through, they actually do it, and then they reflect on the lesson and what went right, what went wrong, what can I do differently, and that whole process is what's evaluated. Now the EdTPA and the PPAT are not going to have the same standard as a national board, but it's really the same general idea. That's what we talk about when we talk about a pedagogical performance. That's what we're looking at. As we look at these things, one of the things that always comes up is, one of the problems is a license is a property right. And so we have to be very, very careful on how we establish those standards in order that they are objective standards that are valid and reliable and defensible in a court of law. Because if they're inconsistent, that becomes a problem. So we've talked about, the Praxis test, degrees, pedagogical performance assessment. Any other thoughts on this one? Or thoughts on what I just told you, that that's a really stupid idea? Travis, shut up, stop talking about it.
What was the first one again?
EdTPA. EdTPA. That's the Pearson one. Yeah, if you Google them, I'm sure you'll find them.
I have a question about that.
Yeah.
So I even think, because I am a teacher, that whenever I do a performance-based one for 180 students, I have to be on my game and I have to check all of the minute details. So who would do that to the degree that you want?
That's a great question. And these assessments aren't free. Okay, the PLT costs about $150. The pedagogical performance measures that we're looking at cost about $300. So we would be looking at eliminating the PLT and using a pedagogical performance. At least that's the thought. Obviously, we haven't done anything. We're just thinking about these things. But yeah, there's a cost to it, definitely.
Is it created? Has it been done before?
Yes, the EdTPA was originally created by Stanford, and the PPAT was created by ETS. But there's a bunch of different states that use EdTPA. Some use the ETS one. Some of them kind of will let them use whatever, as long as they meet the same standard, that kind of thing.
If they don't pass, do they have to pay the $300 over and over and over?
So that's a good question. I can't give you a solid answer. I know you can retake it. But at one point there was discussion about, like, if you failed it, you could retake it once without paying again. But that could just be a total rumor garbage thing. But that's the most I know about it. So, yes.
Just sounds like there's a lot, like a performance test is a lot of overlap with what our principals are doing when they come in and they do our evaluations. So like, what's the interface between those two processes?
I don't know. What should it be? We agree. And the problem that we come across is, again, that objective versus subjective. Principal evaluations are often brought up as a measure of pedagogical knowledge, and it's true. They are. But they're also not, even through all the efforts our state has gone through to try to calibrate principals and help them, to say, here, we're all going to try to do this the same way. That is a very difficult proposition to say that that's consistent across the state, particularly when you have districts versus charter schools versus different laws, different rules. That's the problem there. Should there be something involved? Well, that's one of our other questions. I think I'm starting to run out of time, so I better hurry, but here you go.
In my mind, this is the wrong question to ask.
Okay.
This is the cart before the horse question. It should be, how do we ensure pedagogical knowledge? We've already got weeding out factors. This is just another weeding out factor. We're trying to make teachers competent, not just find out if they are, isn't it? Isn't that what we're trying to do here? We're trying to make sure these teachers are successful, not just say, oh, you're not successful.
That's it. I hadn't thought of that. I don't know. It's a valid question, but on the other side, it also, the purpose of a license is to ensure a minimum level of competency, and if a person doesn't have that competency, they shouldn't have a license. So,
It shouldn't exist. I'm just saying that the place is in the wrong order.
okay, well, that's fair. All right, do we have another question I wanted to let's skip to this one real quick because we only have about 5 minutes. So when we talk about a license, what is the LEA's role in that license? I've mentioned that a license is a property right. You have a property right to your license. What's the LEA's role there? The state issues the license. What's the LEA's role?
Again, I feel they should have no role. I think there's too much, it's too close to home, there's too much prejudice. Bottom line, LEAs look at the bottom line in their M&O budgets. They look at difficulty in getting people, and it's real easy to lower your standards at that local level because it's just too close. Anytime you have a licensing board, they need to be removed. They need to be objective. We don't do that with doctors. We don't grant a license to perform medicine at a local level. Well, we need a radiologist, but we can't find him. There's a guy down at the photo shop that does a pretty nice job taking pictures. We'll get him in here. That it is a problem in Utah. And as a result, I feel it's inappropriate for LEAs to have that role.
Thank you.
And I believe LEAs ought to have a lot more role in that, in providing, as the gentleman in the back said, providing ways and opportunities for associate licensed people to grow and to learn and to understand the things that make a good teacher. And I think that is the role of a LEA in licensure, is preparing the teacher to have that professional license.
Thank you. Okay, so what I want to do to wrap this up is go back to some slides that I skipped. So just so you're aware of what the process is, and the first thing I should say, thank you very much for everything that's been said. It's not about, Well, as you can tell, there's not going to be a licensing system that everybody's going to agree on. It's simply not going to happen. When you think about the board politics, the legislature politics, we're doing our best, and the board is doing their best to create the best system they can, but there will not be an agreement. So here's what's going on right now. So the board task force made a proposal in August, and the full board accepted it in September to start moving forward to seek statutory changes to create a 3-tiered licensing system as they had discussed, the associate, professional, LEA specific. That motion was passed by the state board in September, so staff is starting to work on this. That's why Diana and I are here. Because one of the other aspect was, okay, we're going to work with the legislature, but we also need to start figuring out the details. How long do these licenses last? How do you renew a license? If someone comes from out of state, how do they get put into this system? How do they, all those different things have to be figured out. And so starting in the November board meeting, we're going to start bringing some of those details and getting feedback. So later this month, we're actually going to be having some meetings where we're going to dig into some of the details with stakeholders and get feedback and have debates and talk about it. And if any of you are strongly interested in being part of that, just let Ricky know. He'll get me your name, and I'm happy to invite you. We're going to be doing that later this month, and we'll probably be doing it in the future as well. Then the next step was that the chair of the task force, Terrell Warner, and Diana Sudreth made a presentation a couple weeks ago to the Education Interim Committee. Because as I said, this requires statutory change. The level 1, level 2, level 3 license is in statute. And so the board is proposing that the legislature not put the new system into statute, but to remove the restrictions to give the board the authority to handle licensing. So we're not saying put associate level license in statute. That's not what we're saying. We're saying take out those restrictions of statute and let the board establish those things by rule because it's their responsibility. The committee was very receptive to that, and they actually made a motion to initiate a committee bill to do this. Now, those of you that know anything about the legislative process, having a committee bill is very different than having a single bill sponsored by an educator or by a legislator. Those are two different things. So we'll see what happens. And then the next thing is the timeline. So what are we thinking about here? So obviously this is a little dated now. But so if we see the legislature working in January through March, assuming they pass the bill, maybe they don't, I don't know. If they pass the bill, then the board starts working on formal rules that following spring. That's too late to implement this for next school year. We can't be making rules in April and May to start enforcing in September. So the earliest that this would be going in would be the 1920 school year. That's what we're looking at. Now, how do we do the transition? How do we figure out where ARLs go, where APTs go? That's going to be a lot of the detailed conversations, but that's where we're shooting for is the 1920 school year. Okay, again, if you have any other thoughts, you can email me, you can email Ricky. If you really want to be a part of one of those tasks, those little work groups, send us an email, send it to me, send it to Ricky. We'll put you on the list. I think there's going to be a lot of interest, so I can't guarantee that everybody will get to come, but I'm taking every name that I can get. So, all right. Thank you very much, Ricky. That's all we had, I believe. Diana, did you want to add anything? Okay. I guess I better skip. Yes, thank you very much for having us come. And you had very good insights.
Because I said everything yesterday.
She said everything yesterday, so she's saving her voice.
Thank you. If you don't mind sticking around for a bit to talk Praxis, maybe, Travis. Next on our agenda, no problem. The next thing on our agenda is looking specifically at Utah Praxis scores. There already has been comment in here regarding the Praxis, science Praxis, whether it does what it's supposed to do as far as measuring content knowledge or the importance of that. That's not the point of this. The point is that as of right now, rules for endorsements do require that teachers pass the Praxis. The one that I'm specifically interested in talking about with you today is the general science Praxis. Doing some quick research, Utah right now has the highest passing score of any state or province that uses it as a measure for endorsement. To get some quick background, the only endorsement that requires this praxis is the middle level science endorsement to teach 7th and 8th grade. But with that, it also kind of becomes, there are, as far as I'm aware, pre-service people in the room can fix or correct me on this, there are no pre-service programs that are designated specifically for an integrated science program. There are no programs that prepare teachers specifically to teach integrated science that require this, and they graduate with integrated science. For the most part, there are 2 different ways to get this endorsement in general science. One is you are a content specialist and you have a degree in biology, chemistry, physics, physical science, earth science, and because you've been asked to teach 7th or 8th grade, you then have to get the middle level science to teach 7th or 8th grade. So for that, in the endorsement requirements, we have a specific pathway that is pretty simple. Have another endorsement and all the requirements that come with it, and then take and pass the general science praxis exam. The other pathway that we actually adopted about 2 years ago with this body here, the SSECC worked on it, was an alternate pathway. Because the other thing we're seeing is now that we have a lot of LEAs that are starting to move to a classroom model of 6th, 7th, and 8th grade in one building, we had a lot of 6th grade elementary teachers that then are being asked to teach 7th or 8th grade. They're in the room, they like science, they enjoy teaching science. Well, then can you teach 7th or 8th? And they call me and they say, what do I need to do? For that pathway, because most of these teachers generally in most pre-service programs for elementary teachers, there maybe is a requirement of 1 or 2 science content courses, and some less. So for that pathway, we have a different one where they have to take a certain number of integrated courses and then still pass the general science praxis. Long story short, of all the praxis exams that we require of teachers in our current endorsements, this is the one I hear the most about. Usually the comment is, why is it that Utah has a passing score that surpasses every other state? Doing some quick research, like I said, ETS, who actually administers this test, the average of all other states together is a 152. So we're 14 points above the average. Now, what I've asked Travis to do briefly is kind of give us a quick background as to how this score is determined, one, and then we'll look specifically at are we interested in moving forward or possibly reevaluating this score? Travis and I have done some looking into this, but I'll turn the time over to you to give some quick background to how this is established, this passing score, because people are like, why? Do we just think we're so good that we just chose a number of 166? And I'll tell you, there's much more to it than just we picked a number. So go ahead, Travis.
That was either the best segue ever, or I happened to come in right at the right second. So one of those 2 things. The process that we use for educator assessments predates me, quite frankly, just so you know, because the adoption of most assessments was when No Child Left Behind was passed. I was not at the state office there. I was still teaching. But here's the process as it is established. So essentially, when the state looks at adopting a specific test, the first step is to do what's called a content review. And so a group of educators is brought together, ETS comes, and they actually have the opportunity to go through an actual copy of the test. Question by question, they look at it, they're looking, and basically the idea is looking at this test and how well does it or does it not align with our standards for a particular endorsement. And it's not just any group of educators, it's typically groups like this where you've got if you're talking about the math, you're going to bring in math teachers. If you're talking about chemistry, you're going to bring in chemistry teachers, those kind of things. And so this followed the same process. They did a test review, they decided to adopt it. The passing score is established through a process called the standard setting. If any of you really have a lot of time and would like to fall asleep at night, Google the Angoff method, ANGOFF. It's the method of establishing a standard setting for assessments. There's an Angoff and modified Angoff for those of you that are geeks like me. But essentially, it's a process through which you establish. So you bring together a series of experts that are not too far removed from their preparation. So rather than working primarily with seasoned veterans, you're dealing with mid-career folks, 3 to 10 years of experience, because they're most recent, they're not too far removed from their preparation. And what happens is They go through the questions and they become familiar with the test. They talk about what's called a just qualified candidate. So they start defining what a just qualified candidate in this particular subject is. So like, for example, in mathematics, it might say individual understands quadratic equations and how to model them and, you know, those kind of things. So they make these statements as a committee, as a group. And this just qualified candidate being that person who is just barely qualified. We're not talking about the best teacher in the world. When we're talking about a license or a passing score, we're drawing a line between someone we will let teach and someone we won't let teach. So we're trying to define that bottom rung that we'll let them teach, but any further down, we won't let them teach. That's what they're defining. Then once they've defined that thing and they've kind of come to a consensus on a definition of who that person is, they have a lot of statements and they basically have a picture of who this person is. They start going through the test and they rank. So here's question 1. I read through the question. What is the percentage likelihood that our just qualified candidate gets this question correct? So if it's an easy question, it might be 90%. If it's a really hard question, it might be 10%. And so they go through that. Every single individual in the group, usually 15 to 20 people, goes through that with every single question. Then they statistically analyze and pull together that data, and they say, okay, based on what you guys just did, here's the passing score that would establish. And then actually before they do that, I'm sorry, I skipped a step. They start having a discussion, and so they look at, okay, if everybody ranked question 2 was easy, they don't need to talk about it. But if question 20, half of them said it was easy and half of them said it was hard, they have a discussion. Why did you say it was easy? Why did you think it was hard? Those kind of things. And essentially trying to normalize, if you will, their opinions of these questions. And so then they go through and they can revise their, at the end, they go through all the questions and then they revise their ratings. And then they come out, okay, if this is what we're talking about, here's the passing score. That would be, 65% right in a raw score. Or it would be, this many scaled score points. And so at that point, that group then recommends that to the state, and the state adopts the score. At the time that this test was adopted, that standard setting was all Utah teachers. It was only Utah teachers. And the way we do it now, it's actually states get together and do it together, to kind of, take advantage of resources. But at that time, it was all Utah teachers. And then what happens is that's considered a preliminary score. And then 2 to 3 years later, once we have a number of people in Utah that have taken the test, we re-examine the score. So we pull together that same committee and we start, it's called a score review. But we start taking a look at how people in Utah have been doing on the test. Here's where the passing score is right now. How have people been doing? Do we still agree with the alignment of the test? Do we still agree with this just qualified candidate definition? And they decide if they need to move the test score or not. Most of the time it doesn't move, or it moves up just a little. From my experience, I've done a bunch of those now. It's gone down once, I think. That's not to mean it can't, because it hasn't happened. But that's essentially how it happens. The only other thing I would add, so in that process, again, that all predated me, just so you're aware, so it definitely predated Ricky. That's how that was established. Just so you're aware, a 166, now it's a scaled score, and you guys understand assessment, so it's not a perfect analogy, but a scaled score of 166 is probably somewhere around 68 to 72% raw correct, just so you know. Somewhere in that vicinity. It is on the high side. I said 68 to 72. Yeah, 62 to 78 would be a bigger window. But, and we're happy to look at it again. I mean, times change. The requirements in 2004 for an integrated science endorsement are different than the requirements now for middle level science. So however you guys want to approach it, we can certainly make it happen. Do you have any questions on how the test score was set? I'm happy to answer any questions you have. Okay,
Awesome. Thank you, Travis.
Real quick. So the alignment to the new standards hasn't been done, right?
To my knowledge, the test has not been revised to align with the next generation science standards. The typical process is when tests are regenerated, they pull together a national advisory committee to like, revise the content of the test. If it changes drastically, then we have to go through the whole process because like it's a new test, and so we have to reestablish a score. If it doesn't, if the statisticians say, well, this is statistically equivalent, then we don't have to change it. It just depends on how much they change the test itself.
But you don't know if that's been done or not.
I'm pretty sure it hasn't, because they usually, standards are what, a year, 2 years old now? Or am I crazy? Oh, okay.
NGSS is not the 2015.
So they're probably in the process of starting that, but no, they haven't done it yet.
Okay, so the action that I move to you quickly for discussion is simply this. First, based on your experience with this test and your teachers, what have you heard as far as possibly or definitely a need in changing the score for this test? That's the first discussion I would like to have, and then I guess we'll just go there. And then anything else you have, I guess.
Okay. I can't, there it is, because I can't push buttons very well. At BYU in our biology education program, we do prepare them so that they get their middle level endorsement right out of the program. They always do worse on this test than they do on their biology test. They always get a lower score, but for the most part, they pass that test. I've had one, probably our top student teacher last year, who did not pass it, and she was working all summer. I think she took it 3 times at least to pass it, but she historically was a low test taker anyway. So most of our teachers coming through, most of our pre-service teachers are passing that test, but again, just right at that threshold of that 166. So.
Quick follow-up. Is this just biology program?
This is just biology. I don't believe the physical sciences programs are doing that through Dwayne.
Rash, just re-exposure, we're weeding them out because of that.
I can't speak to this specific test itself, because that data is available. We could figure that out. Have we done it? No. In general, and I can't speak for APT. I honestly can't. It's too new. But for ARL, our experience is actually that they pass the content knowledge at a higher rate because they've worked in the field. But again, that's general, all subjects, everything. We'd have to look at this test individually to answer that.
Ricky, my trend is those that struggle the most with it are content-specific teachers. So they will have a biology or a physics degree, and then they struggle with one piece of the opposite of that. And so they're highly skilled, qualified teachers usually out of, the university, but, they just have focused their attention on one particular science area. Not to say that, and I think that my discussion is that they're able to competently teach 7th grade physics, but the test is teaching or assessing at a much higher level than 7th grade physics is. And so, where we can work with them on that little bit of a bump in terms of content. So I think that those that are struggling with it for that reason, specifically.
Okay. Other comments?
I think that's true because we don't have an integrated science degree. So all of us have it in like a biology or chemistry or physics and something. So that's what I've seen too. But is there a rule, like how many times you can take it? Like, because I didn't catch that part because you said whether they were qualified or not. So I know I was off by like 3 points the first time, and then the next time it was like great. So
it's there is no limit on the number of times you can take the assessment. In fact, and I'm going to plug this right now. I'm going to put it on record. If you have an educator that has attempted any Praxis test 5 times and been unable to pass it, have them contact me, because what I can do is I can request that ETS do a test review, So ETS looks at their test results and tries to help them focus their area of preparation, say, here's where you have the most room for improvement. To be perfectly honest with you, it's helped some people, and some people thought it was dumb. So, I mean, I've gotten both responses, but it doesn't cost anything. So if you have any teachers struggling to that level, have them contact me.
So is the rule like if they don't like pass it within their first 3 years or whatever, then they're not qualified to teach? Because like I could teach a whole year and then I passed it. Does that make sense?
The licensing, we cannot issue a full license in a particular area without passage of the test, according to board rule. But you can get on an SAEP, you can have, remember all those ridiculous bubbles? There's about 7 of them you could use that the district would use for you, essentially.
Okay, there's a question written into it. I don't know where it came from, but it says, is it possible that you could have a probationary test score range that would allow teachers to absorb, relearn content while teaching, and then retake it? I would say that no, and that's just my answer. What we have in store is, again, so the way that system is set up currently is that is the baseline of what you should know in order to teach. Now, again, we can reevaluate that. But to solve this problem, what we do have in place is what's called a state-approved endorsement plan. If we have a teacher that doesn't qualify simply because they can't pass a test, they can sign up for an SAEP, state-approved endorsement plan, be given 2 years to teach, and then by the end of those 2 years, they could, towards the end or whatever, they have plenty of times or at least wait until they feel more comfortable to take the test and still be qualified. So that's kind of the system we have in place for those that are on the bubble or maybe right there at that point. But that's the answer I would give to that. Travis, did you agree? Or I think it'd be the dangerous.
Yeah, absolutely. The problem is I get the phone calls where people say, I missed the test score by 1 point. Can't you do something for me? And the answer is, remember earlier today I talked about being objective versus subjective and legally defensible. The second I make an exception based on a test score, I've just established a due stat test score. And I established it in a way that is not legally defensible. That's why we go through that ridiculous process I described to you. That's a legally defensible process. So.
Yep.
So if they happen to be in this situation and they're out of, after this year, they're out of their LOA years, does the SAEP extend those LOA years?
Can you define, please? Oh, letter of authorization.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was like,
so
LOA?
If you...
Jane described
I know
LOA.
what that is. I know what that is.
No. I know what they are. I'm sorry. I've just never heard them with that acronym before.
And we're going to, I'm going to suggest a request a test review. Because they're taking it like...
Sure. Absolutely.
So really quick, the question, if you can't hear in the internet world, the question is, what options are there for those that are on letters of authorization, and they're out? They only get 3 of those, and there's no other option. So, Travis.
So if you do the letters of authorization first, then you can do an SAEP, which would give you more years. If you do the SAEP first and they fail to complete it, you cannot do a letter of authorization in the same area. So like it's good. Again, remember the ridiculousness of licensing rules? So you can do it one way, you can't do it the other. By the way, in the new proposed system, the answer would be ultimately if the local school board believes that they should teach, they'd give them an LEA specific. And if the parents didn't like that, then the parents would vote in a new board. That's kind of how they've described it. So there you go.
Thank you.
I have a question. We have this general science test, but whenever I look at other states and what they do, the general science, it always covers like their high school courses that they pass the general science, and that their state lets them teach biology or physics or chemistry. And in Utah, you have to do this test that's really hard just for middle school, but there's also a middle school science praxis. So why do we do this big hard one that other high schools do? Why don't we just adopt and let them do the middle school science? Because that's the only grades that are required to do it.
And to clarify, there is another Praxis exam that's called the middle level science.
Right. That just makes
So
sense to me. I mean, that's a practice. So I don't know.
Yeah. I think that is one of the other options I was going to say. This isn't the only test. I mean, you can go through that process of adopting a test to look at any test. The one thing to be aware of, you're absolutely correct, and politically, that is a real problem for some of those states. That there is a national fight between general practitioner, if you guys probably already know this, general science preparation and content specific preparation. And there's some pretty strong people or entities behind both of those sides. So it's quite a debate, just so you're aware. NCTQ always tells me about that.
Okay, other discussions to this? I feel like I'm doing Robert's Rules discussion of the motion, even though we never put a motion in play. All right, well, the motion on the table. So the next step is to really take action. Do we as a body, again, so I guess I should make this really clear. This is a committee, right? SSECC, coordinating committee. The job of this body is to make decisions. Sometimes we don't have complete authority to make final decisions, but it is a decision that we can make to move forward to look into this. This is one thing that we do have control over as a body. So I take it to you specific as far as if there's any, first I guess I'll get some other discussion if necessary, but do we want to look specifically for the general science praxis to have this reevaluated by ETS? Any final discussion of that before we can, well, I say we do a vote, but discussion of that before we vote. Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Ricky,
Oh, good. Seeing some.
No, I mean, I think we should. I think that the score needs to be looked at. I think, lowering it a couple points would be advantageous for a lot of reasons, but I think that's where the discussion needs to be at. So whether that's a review or what the process is of doing that, I propose we look at that.
What about the option for the middle level, though? Just readopting that, can we do that, or no, we can't?
Good.
It would still require the process, though, wouldn't it, Travis?
Yeah, it'd be the same process.
Yeah, you would still have to.
You could even start with a process that looks at both tests and decide which one you're interested in more, and then go through the standard setting for that particular test, whether it's the one we're using now or another one. That's standard procedure.
Kelsey.
I know I've worked with some people who haven't passed and then retaken and passed. I'm wondering how many people is actually prohibited to, in terms of having to pass this, and how many people is it really? Because I like the idea. I think it's smart. Like they have to prove that they're at least a speed in this content area to be able to teach.
I will tell you that as I have access to teacher records, and I have seen some that literally have taken this more than 8 times and not passed it. So, and I know then, and I mean plural, there are some that have taken this many, many times. And usually I don't have access to the scores on my version of it, but I see pass, not pass. There are some that for the most part are very, very, very close. So again, but that's a good point. So any others? Yeah, Deb.
I think and the problem too. So for example, the first time I took it, it was very heavily in the earth sciences, and that's not my strong point. Didn't do well. The second time it was heavier concentrated in the biology, and I passed it with another 15 point on top of that. So I was surprised that the test itself was as off as it was. I would have expected a specific concentration of the 4 core sciences, but and I don't understand the whole testing process. But the 2 tests were very emphasized differently from each other. So me, biology background, piece of cake. The first one, a little more difficult because I didn't, like Matt had said, I came from that biology background. So I was sort of surprised that it was as different as my first standard test.
Good. So the comment is that for people that have taken it multiple times, they find that there's a variation in the content area. And what I mean by that is, it's what she was saying, I guess, I'll paraphrase, is that sometimes it seems like there's a lot of earth science questions and fewer of another. I will say that these tests do run on a specific blueprint that does give a bit of variety or variation in what's offered, but usually it's pretty consistent, right? That the blueprint is that it's between this range and this range, earth science, this range, biology, this physical science, so on.
If different versions of the test were not psychometrically equivalent, it would not be legally defensible.
So there is a blueprint to it. It could simply be that the questions you got in that area are ones you're more familiar with, or I don't know. So I mean, but there is some pretty stringent blueprint there.
But I only say that because of your
understanding of what a difficult process it is. It sort of adds credence to the complexity of this issue, especially when we're looking at 6th, 7th, and 8th grade science teachers who are probably not as strong in those science-specific areas. So we're shooting ourselves in the foot relatively. So dropping it points to allow a greater engagement seems to make sense.
And just to be clear, what we're saying is this process may not actually result in a dropping of the score. There's a possibility that in doing this process, we find that it goes up. I mean, we don't really know the outcome. Again, it's objective. So we set up the system, we put it in place, and we look at it. So I mean, that's what we're looking at. Now, again, my guess is a part of this also will be after the score has been set, whether we choose to continue with this test or even look at a different test. What will happen is that there's still 3 years later will be a standard setting review of sorts. How well did this work? So it will be put in place. Now, again, so we don't know. We're simply looking at reevaluating, looking at it briefly with the information that Travis and I were able to look at one time with these numbers around these tests. It is pretty significant, the number. It depends on the area, or what we can see really quickly is how universities are doing, because every student or every teacher that takes this, they choose what university they went to. And we can look at the major Utah universities and say, okay, how are BYU students doing, or ones that graduated from BYU doing on this test? How are the others? And we saw that it was pretty low in some cases. So, I mean.
It wasn't consistent.
But it wasn't consistent. There were some that were doing quite well and others that were doing extremely poorly. So, and it just depends. So the motion on the table, I'm going to. Oh, Matt?
Hold on. I think another discussion is that we need to have is that what's working, what's happening in our buildings. So what's because of personnel and licensure, what ends up happening is you have a teacher that's licensed under biology or earth science, and because of staffing, they need to move them to 7th and 8th grade. And so that teacher then is required to take that middle level license because they're no longer highly qualified. We also have a high population of those teachers that are struggling with that, not because, which I think is a data point that we need to consider, that yes, they've been teaching basically middle level science, but they're struggling on that test. So that's another reason for me to say, hey, let's, if we can, look at adjusting that a point or two. That'd help alleviate some of those stresses in terms of the staffing concern that we have. So.
Final comments. Yes.
I think perhaps, in my experience base in a charter school is much less, but there's an amazing teacher who's taken it 3 times, missed it by 1 point each time. Look at her SAGE test scores. If they're supposed to be meaningful, really good. She is a great teacher. And so the thing is, whether you lowered a point or 2, that isn't going to make her a better teacher. I think, having worked for the government my whole life, education being a little more than half, there's something called an exception to policy, because I was one of the people who had to approve exception to policies. Somebody pleads their case, I didn't do that, but I have all this other supporting thing, and it has to stand on its own merit, and somebody, does a King Solomon thing and does what's right, as opposed to standing behind a regulation and saying, oh, you missed by 1 point, too bad, try again. And I think that that's perhaps a more common sense approach. Is that teacher a good teacher? They were put into a situation perhaps they didn't really want to, but they're a team player. Okay, I'll teach that. Oh, you got to take this test? Come on. At some point in time, what are we doing to the teacher? If it's a brand new teacher, one thing, you want them to prove themselves, but we have some veteran teachers out there that are really good, and they find themselves in a situation, and at some point they just go, the heck with it. We need to do what we can to keep the really good teachers that we have.
So that sounds, again, looking into an alternate option to a Praxis exam. So, I mean, that's, I think, really what you're getting at. Is there another way to measure competency knowledge, or content knowledge?
After they've given it the old, the good old college try, but at some point in time, maybe there's some other factors, and somebody should look at it, and whoever that person is should be a trusted person at the state level. And if they say, yeah, I think that person should be granted the licensure or whatever else, as opposed to just making 1 point the difference in all the additional preparation somebody has to do, or somebody having to seek employment elsewhere because of a single point.
Got it. My understanding is, All right. So, with that though, our current rules for licensing are based on No Child Left Behind still, because our ESSA plan, I mean, so, or no, where are we, I mean, because right now with No Child Left Behind did require a test to measure competency. Wasn't that a statement in our state plan for at least? Or am I incorrect?
I don't know the current plan that well, I guess. In No Child Left Behind, there was a rigorous assessment was one of the ways of demonstrating content knowledge. It wasn't the only way. The board eventually in 2007 said, look, if you can't pass the test, you can't have a license. They drew that line, and it's in board rule. So it's in board rule, but in fact, we could get into a 30-minute argument on that, so we don't need to.
Okay, so hearing all those things, and again, the idea of looking for an alternate option, I mean, I think right now with what Travis and Diana just kind of presented, we're in a time to be able to have those kind of discussions, but that is not what we're doing today. Today, because that is still the board rule is a test, let's look, and I'm going to say specifically looking at the general science praxis exam, what would you feel comfortable looking at? Do we look at simply adjusting the score, or would you look at possibly at other tests as well? I want your input on this, Scott.
Yeah, I just got back from a huge conference on standard setting and assessment, and they heard that we only use science teachers for standard setting. Every one of the statisticians would have made a bunch of noise, because the current thinking is there need to be more voices at standard setting, and so I'm in support of reviewing the general science praxis, but we have some great university partners who teach science. We have researchers out in the field who are working in that field right now who would lend a really objective voice to our standard setting that wasn't present when this number was set. And so they would look at this and say, as a stat, in terms of the stats going, this was really heavily biased on because it was all science teachers.
To clarify, that was my slip of the tongue. There were the standard settings are typically made up of teachers of the content area and university professionals that prepare teachers in the field and district level content specialists. That's who would have been represented in those standard settings.
Cool. That makes me feel a lot better.
Yeah, that was my fault because I didn't say it correctly.
But we do have other people out there, like I said, people out in the field, researchers who usually aren't brought into that, who we should bring in for that. But I'm in favor of moving.
Okay, so the motion is up. Sorry, please.
It wasn't quite clear to me if we have a situation with new standards in a couple years, or if we don't, but the test is aligned with NGSS, are we going to be in a situation in 2 or 3 years from now when we have to do this again?
So again, I don't know. That's a great question. Travis?
The answer is that if the National Advisory Committee that manages the tests looks at the next generation science standards and makes changes that are psychometrically different to the test, yes. If they don't, no.
Okay. So, with that said, motion on the table, I'm going to say it, no one talk, I'm just kidding, is that we move forward in reviewing a new standard setting process for the general science praxis, continuing to use that as the praxis test. Everyone okay with that motion before we move on? Second, got it. Okay, let's vote then. All in favor of starting a new standards setting process for the general science praxis exam, please raise your hand. Any opposed? I see it unanimous. Oh, I'm hiding. One opposed. Noted. Okay. Thank you. Then with that, we are going to move on. Thank you, Travis, for your time. Okay. With that, we're going to move on. So here we go. Now we need some time for you in discussion. We want to work together with this. Here's what's going on. With the implementation of the new 6th through 8th grade SEED standards this year, and with the possibility of K through 5 and 9 through 12 SEED standards coming soon, we need to promote with teachers, with administrators, with parents, with students, the importance of this new way of doing science. What I want to spend some time with right now with you in smaller groups, hopefully, and typing away on this wonderful keyboard, and then we'll come back together, is we need to brainstorm some ways that we can promote the importance of 3D science in our state. We have, and I will be very blunt with this, I still to this day get calls every now and then from some smaller charters, some rural districts that call me up saying, wait, do we have new standards this year in science? I mean, they still don't know. And as much as I can get it out there, I've done everything that I know of getting it to them, and it's still not there. What I would love right now is for us to get into some smaller groups based on where you are and brainstorm what are ways that we can not only promote this understanding and get hopefully build excitement about these changes, but more importantly, see what we can do to improve what's happening in our classrooms across the state. On the shared notes, I have 2 sections you'll see if you go there. What now that we can leverage? What programs are out there now that you are aware of that we can use to start meeting? And we're not just talking like resources. We're talking a full-on statewide campaign that is going to get into every home in the state of Utah to talk about why this is so great. So what exists now maybe in your specific LEA, maybe nationally, maybe what's out there that we can use, and also what are some other things we can do? I'm going to give you some time, like I said, in small groups to kind of start writing out your ideas, and then we will come back together and have a discussion. If you are one of our friends online, please take some time as well to go into the notes on the PowerPoint there. You can see, you can type it in, tinyurl.com/SSECC notes 17-10. And start working on this. So do I need to organize groups, or are we okay where we are? I solemnly swear that I will be doing this and not something else during this time, because really we need your help with this. All right, everyone, good, great. Get to work, time's yours. Okay, if we can come back together. The next step in this process, after having now that everyone kind of goes away.
Yeah, I think they all thought it was like a break.
It was a break. They had a break.
Just barely. Oh, I talked to Josh too. That's why he left.
Okay. We had some people that interpreted a break and some didn't. So actually, let's get out of your groups. Let's give you 5 minutes to use a restroom, do what you could do. Feel free to leave. And we will come back together at 11:16. All right, that's 5 minutes. Hopefully we're refreshed. Hopefully we're ready to move forward. Love the conversations. Come back. Come. Thank you. All righty. So moving forward, what we have now is a very large list of resources. We have a list of materials and such and ideas of helping this move forward. Now, just to be clear, there was a great question. It's kind of like, so wait, one more time. What was our focus? What are we doing here? And here's the thing. The purpose of this is there's a shift right now in best practice for science education. Research shows that kids being actively involved in doing science is a lot better than kids memorizing science. Now, I will say from experience in this field that even though we have had in our new standards, and by new I'm not meaning our current ones, I mean the ones that were adopted in 2002, because they weren't the first version of standards, but our 2002 standards started including and working specifically, well, they actually started in 95, but with ILOs, intended learning outcomes. As I travel the state, there are still science teachers that when I say ILO, they say, what? And when I say intended learning outcome, you know, the stuff we have kids doing, they go, what? So no matter what we do, there are teachers that simply do what they do because it works for them. But the purpose of this discussion here was what can we do to help those teachers have a desire to move forward? And not only that, what can we do to help administrators that travel around in their classroom or the classrooms of their schools and see teachers that are still having kids sit and get as opposed to do? What do we do to help those administrators go, wait, that's not what science is supposed to look like? I want you to try something else and kind of give that help with that push. And also something for parents. Because when parents, in my experience, find what the hope of these standards are for their students, they will do the same thing. Why do you still have 5 hours of worksheets to do every night in science? I was told these standards don't do that as much anymore, if at all. So parents are the ones also saying, wait, where are we want to get everyone understanding the shifts in these. So that was the purpose of that assignment that I gave you. Now I'm going to add a quick plea and side note that's off topic. I got an email 3 or 4 days ago from the secretary of the board saying that the chairperson of the Standards and Assessment Committee, because I'll be meeting in her committee this time next week, she likes to meet with the people that are coming so she knows what it is they're talking about and kind of get an understanding of what I'll be talking about. So that is today, sometime between 11 and noon, and they'll text me, I guess, whenever that time comes that they want me to go and talk to her. I will give you the heads up that what I would love to do, if she's okay with this, is be like, just so you know, if you have questions about why we're moving forward with this, right now there's a meeting with the people that want this moving forward. If you want to spend 5 minutes, I'd love for you to come over and talk with them. So either way, when I get that text, I have to leave this room. So I'm going to hopefully give you some direction, because that hopefully isn't going to happen all that soon. But when it does, I will be leaving to meet with her. During that time, what I would love now is for each of you, there were several smaller groups and there was kind of a larger group in the back. I would love for you to take some time to share out the ideas that you had specifically for that. Again, we are talking a PR campaign of sorts and helping teachers, administrators, parents, and students demand this change in their classrooms. That's what we're looking for. And I will add to that maybe as well, because we haven't done it, but because they're in the room, that higher education is the same. There should be a demand that higher ed does the same thing, that what's happening in that realm should be based on what's best for science education research, or what science research says. So we have a list of stuff. There are going to be 2 parts that I'd like to do with it, because we have until noon on this agenda item, which I don't think we need 40 minutes, but that's what we have scheduled on our agenda. First step is, what are the big ideas that your groups came up with to help with this? What are things that we can do to really spread the word as this body, whether it's individually through your LEAs, or whether it's a holistic SSECC is now presenting, or whether it's using and leveraging the help of the Utah Science Teachers Association, whatever it is, what are our next steps? So those are our 2 pieces. What did you talk about in your group? And then next, what are the low-hanging fruits? What are the pieces that we could start doing now to get this moving forward? So please, I repeat, if you plan on talking, make sure it's in front of a microphone. 1, because it's being recorded, and 2, because people online need to be able to hear you as well. They hopefully have been doing some kind of brainstorming on their own, but it's just you. It's kind of hard to add to the conversation. If you are online and would like to speak and participate, feel free to unmute your computer or wherever you're talking and talk to us. That shouldn't be a problem. So the last thing that I ask is for someone or someone's, plural, to, while this conversation is happening, especially if I am not in the room because I'm being forced to leave, kind of summarize these pieces. I don't need a summary of what's already up above. What I need here is at the bottom, the next steps, right? So down here at the bottom, there's the next steps, which are the pieces that we will be doing moving forward. Now, this is action on all of us. This isn't something that Ricky will do, because Ricky's capacity already is pretty thin. But Ricky will support us in doing something. So great ideas usually come with, and here's how I think we as a group can get this done. So let's move forward. What are our next steps? And what are our ideas that came up in your groups that you kind of maybe had some aha moments with?
Hello, I'm going to share. We need a bus. We need a big bus. We need a bus that has a message. Okay, we're talking back here that one thing we all need to do is have the same message, that it's really important, and that our message is accessible to parents and students that don't know what phenomenal science is, three-dimensional teaching is, that we need to talk in layman's terms. So what other suggestions do you have? But I really think we need some kind of message. I know a couple years ago when we were rolling out seed standards, we met as a committee and we came up with answers that we could give people who had questions. So we need some type of standard message to send out, and then we need a system to deliver that message. Others?
A physical bus.
I seriously think it would be awesome if we literally had a physical bus with a group of leaders who are willing to go throughout the state and spend time with communities, focus groups, sharing the same message, but letting communities experience what it looks like and what it feels like to learn science in this way, instead of just telling them this is what it looks like. They need to feel it. And the parents that came to my focus groups, I hear from them still. And they put pressure on their teachers, their kids' teachers, because they liked what they felt. And my teachers did a great job presenting 3D lessons to them. And then we tried to have a common message throughout the 14 focus groups we did with our community. We're a pretty good sized district. So, but I think it would be something new and different that people would respond to.
Let's go for a bus ride. I do think we have to model around the state. It's the only way it's going to work. And I think the best layperson term is to call it just authentic science, and just keep coming back to that. What does a scientist do? Well, they don't start with vocabulary. They start with phenomenon questions, and just keep coming back to that basic language and get away from what we educators love to do, which is lace everything with edu-speak. But I agree that it's going to be what I call sales pitch. We're going to have to get out and sell it.
STEM Action Center can come up with a bus.
You guys are mentioning a bus, right? So just to chime in from informal educators, we have lots of vans. We have like 5. We go to every school in the state oftentimes, and we model the 3D science and seed standards. So I would encourage all teachers to reach out to the informal educator resources that we have in Utah. You have the Leonardo, the museums, the zoo, the aquarium, and a lot of these guys do travel around and contribute in the similar way that you guys are thinking. So.
Even your community, they don't, well, you're limited, but my experience with that in their activities is they don't even always present in a full 3D. That's where I think we need a collective shared message and experience.
Oh, sorry, you really can't see it some angles. So one thing that we noticed is that every district that is coming up with their own seed and 3D or GRC lessons. And so I think we got that training and then we all went out and did our best. And so there are people like, I know Davis has done such a good job coming and presenting to schools, but still people are coming up with their own thing and we all don't know. So there's like every district has their own little website and we need to come together on like maybe like we suggested like I don't even know who would collect all of them, but if you had them all send in and it's not like you could have a bazillion under one standard that you could have, and you make sure they all have the same, like you said, the same 3D. They have to all have the certain things. So we come together, we say, your lesson has to have this. If it has this, please put it in. And then you get the resource to everyone.
I wanted to mention, I don't know if this is on folks' radars, the NSTA, the National Science Teachers Association, they have lessons online that have done that to some extent. And so it's probably something that some people in this room probably know about that, but there are lots of resources at the national level that are doing that. So getting that word out to people might be important.
Right. But for me, when I research it, I have to make sure I get myself familiar with what part of the NSTA did they like pull for my seed standard. And the other, I guess, hurdle is that we all lump our seed standards differently. So like Brett Molding said, you had to have them clumped, right? You have to teach them together in tandem with one another, and we sometimes can't decide which standards should be taught at the same time versus others. So I feel stressed when I go to NSTA because I haven't linked them that way. But the problem is there's charter schools or there's rural areas that are not getting the resource, and so they already feel hesitant, and then they can't go through it, you know? I don't know.
No one wants to hear me. I know that various times I've had conversations about having like a crosswalk of what in NSTA, what's the specific, and on Utah, on SEED, what's the specific correlation? Is that easily accessed somewhere? Is it done?
Science standards align to our SEED standards. I will Google in my email. That's how I find it. And I'll link it to this document. Yeah, sorry. So Ricky has done that. There's it's called SEED Crosswalk. I bet if any of you search your emails for SEED Crosswalk from Ricky, you would find it. It's just a Google document, a living that I will link to these notes as well, so you can easily access that document.
So I don't know if one other thing, just because if we're going to have a dull, I'll just add this in. So like another thing is we have a hard time having teachers switch over and finding the need for it. Like there's not that internal drive to change, because if you really believe you're going to change the future, then you would do a lot of stuff to do that. And so it's almost like we need to like promote that you never know who in your classroom is going to be the next inventor or who's going to do the next scientific finding. You know, like for example, there's this kid that I grew up with that's like a year older than me, and he did horrible in school, just not good. And then finally, by the time he had it all figured out when he was in college, he found out like how great he was, and now he's in charge of putting out like the spaceship, like isn't it called Orion that's going to Mars? He is like figuring out those calculations, and she told like a really neat story of how he figured what that calculation was. But like if you think about our traditional schooling, like of course he failed because we're not doing what we need to do for them. So if we all had that internal drive of like, who are you going to affect someday? Like you need to be that teacher for them because you don't know who you're going to affect. Almost that, like we all have that intrinsic feeling to do good, and that's what's going to drive it more than anything else, I think.
So I wanted to mention something. My name's Lauren Barthco, and I'm from the University of Utah College of Education. And a couple of colleagues and I, who also work in higher education a few minutes ago, had a discussion about how we're very interested in running some kind of PD for teacher leaders or for district folks or for whomever across districts around kind of initial kind of like what do these 3D lessons look like, how can you get started, things like that. But the place where we got a little stuck is funding. And I haven't been in Utah very long, and so I don't understand how that system works. So I'm going to just kind of put that out there, that it feels a little bit like the barrier is the funding side of things.
Speaking from, sorry, am I talking over somebody? Was somebody over here wanting to? Okay, I'll go. I know I'm in a very fortunate situation where I have a budget for my district, for teacher professional development. And if universities approach me and say, hey, we want to do this, I have the funding available for that. But I know I'm the exception. And so you can talk with me. And and seriously, but with that, what we could do is then make a way, okay, how can we replicate this to get it out to other teachers, maybe through video. It's not ideal, but at least it's something in place that we could move that forward in that direction. So we could chat later too. And I know there's other districts that I'm sure they've got funding for PD for their teachers. It's just knowing what the opportunities and resources are. So I would say definitely contact districts and see what they have, how you could work together for that approach.
So that's a pseudo 3D lesson, or that's a traditional lesson. So what's the breakpoint of criteria for a true three-dimensional science lesson where a teacher's going to go, oh, I get it. This is where I was missing that piece, or maybe I was missing all of the pieces, or maybe I only think two-dimensionally. So, as a teacher, maybe that would be helpful, because we go and we say, oh, here, I'm going to come show you what I do. And then you leave and you're like, okay, I see what you did, but what were the pieces? Because I may not just observe and understand that piece just by watching you do it.
Can I talk to that one for a minute? And Ricky, can I pull a diagram up on your screen up here? And if I go through this and you guys are like, shut up, Tyson, that's not 3D science, then feel free. But this is what we've been using with our teachers in terms of basically showing them this is the target and this is how you tell if you hit the target or not. Okay, seat storylines. And then keep your mouse right on top of that right there. Otherwise it moves. Okay, so this is basically our target blueprint that we use to check everything. So every little single individual lesson, and when our principals go into the classroom, we tell them to look for these specific things. And it's broken down to like an individual student kind of look and then an environment look. Okay, so what's inside this black circle, if you're sitting in the classroom observing, you would want to see that stuff happening clearly with an individual student. Okay, so I should be able to look at each kid or one specific kid and say, is that kid working to figure out some sort of core idea, preferably through some sort of phenomena? And do they know that that's what they're doing? Right? If the kid's just blindly doing something because the teacher told them to do it and they don't know that they're actually trying to figure this thing out, then they didn't hit the target. Okay? They should be trying to figure that out, but they should be figuring that out through engaging in doing these practices. Okay, so they're doing these things in order to try to figure that out. Okay, if they're learning about this thing but they're not engaged in these, they haven't hit the target. Okay, but then they should also be framing the way they look at that through some sort of a cross-cutting concept. So they may be looking for cause and effect. The teacher might have tried to frame their thinking in some way with, I want you to look at this system in particular, and within this system, let's go through and kind of analyze the parts of it in order for us to try to figure out what's happening here. Okay, but that should be transparent to the students. The teacher should know what's going on and the students should know what's going on. And you should be able to sit there and see that happening. Okay, so on an individual student level, you should see that going on. All right, all three dimensions hit with the purpose of trying to figure out some sort of phenomena. The teacher knows what's going on, kid knows what's going on, and you usually have to watch for at least 20 minutes because, when you're teaching this way, you're going to have kind of this 80-20 rule where you got 80% the kid is doing their stuff and 20% the teacher is directing, right? So this 80-20 back and forth, and so you might get in there and see part of that 20% where the teacher's doing some directing and getting the kids situated and organized, and part of the 80% where the kid is really engaged in this part of it, okay? if you go in and this is hit, but the kid is siloed by themselves the entire time, then I would say that, yeah, you did 3D science, but you did a crappy job of it. Okay. If you're going to really hit this target, you have to bring in the environment side of things. So if you take a step back and now look at the entire class as a whole, that whole class should hit these other 4 things, meaning that the task that's given to the kids is loose enough that it allows for creativity. So they're not given a lab handout and said, do all these steps, right? They plan and carry out an investigation with some boundaries, but they are allowed creativity in kind of their process and their thinking and in the way they write their ideas out or display their ideas, right? And whatever process is happening in the class, it should require that students communicate with each other and that they're sharing their ideas and having to confront, this is what I think against what the other people in the room think, and going back and forth. And so in our district, we call this the breathing effect. So individual student kind of coming up with, this is what I think, comparing that to a group and comparing what I think against what they think, taking that out to a class-wide discussion, and then back down through that process. So kind of in and out continually. Like I said, if you stay here and it's just a single kid, you haven't really hit the target, right? Because they're not being allowed this piece here. And you're probably fueling a major misconception in a bunch of your kids if they haven't had the chance to confront what they think against other people, right? Now to do that and to come up with how they're going to run this stuff, it requires this other piece of collaboration where they are working with other people, not just by themselves. So that should be there. And then the last part is that the tasks that are asked of the kids and the way that they have to represent their thinking should be moving them through DOK levels 1 up through 4 back and forth continually. So you should see that movement. If they're continually staying at 1, then they're probably not hitting these things for sure, and they're probably definitely not hitting this, right? So if you're hitting all these things, you'll get that. But you kind of have to hit the whole gamut to hit the target. So when we go in and we have teachers evaluate themselves, we have them use this and say, okay, how did you hit the target, or where do you think you missed? And sometimes they'll say, well, I think I was a little bit too rigid on my process, and the kids just kind of did what I said, and they didn't get to have any sort of creative freedom. So I'm going to kind of relax that a little bit and change it up so they can have a little bit more creativity. Or I didn't give them opportunities to talk to each other enough, so I'm going to kind of change this up so they have a chance to do that. Anyway, I don't know if that helps, but that's what we use.
Yeah.
Oh. So we're talking about campaigning, and on the notes you had, we had different target audiences. One of them was district and school administrators. So I have this question. I appreciate the STEM education and what he just went through, but I'm wondering if those practices and dispositions are measured and valued. Are they reflected on standard forms and report cards? Because that probably would be our first line of attack. We may value all of those things and see how important they are and change lives, but until parents see students are measured on that and their children will be evaluated that way rather than just the A and did they get the right answer, all the campaigning we do just kind of seems like it could be fluff. Am I on? Okay. For example, my district just hired Ken O'Connor, I think that's his name, as a consultant for standards-based education. And as far as I can tell in our meetings that we have had, it has been about content. It hasn't been about practice. So it's just something to consider, and I don't know if that's happening other places.
In Davis, we on our report cards going out to elementary students this coming year, and in our 7th and 8th grade as well, those are reported on a standards-based format for practices and cross-cutting concepts coming out. So our teachers, when they give assignments, they grade the particular assignment, but they can always put a score towards the practices over the course of the year so the parents can see how they're continually progressing in that. And haven't quite got this far yet, but we're going to hopefully come up with, this is kind of where we want kids to hit each year as they go through, and eventually set up a grading framework that has kind of checkpoints along the way. Basically what the K-12 framework for science education wanted us to set up, right? It's saying these kids should hit these benchmarks as they go through your school system, and they should show continual progression on the practices. And so we just kind of added those as a supplemental piece to the grading program. We'll see how it goes this year. I don't know.
I also know Stanford. We like to bring up Stanford. I did not go to Stanford. I went once for track meet and it was wonderful. But I was so excited. Anyways, I just watched, they had a webinar on performance-based assessments, and through that, one of the science examples they shared, they have a great group, and I forget what they're called, but I'll find the links and I can put them in the notes. They have, and this is just a starting point, but they have rubrics already created for each practice and for each cross-cutting concept. See? That we could definitely do some good with, so I will link those into the notes.
Awesome.
So I'm just going through the list here. One of the ideas that I put down is seat standard teacher ambassadors is what I call them. But I think that we need to leverage those that are working through this process, that have gone through the iterations of becoming better at this process of 3D science, and we have some of our teachers that have dove in and taken on the challenge and are becoming the exemplars of that. But I think there's a way to leverage them and send them out would be a great way to campaign. I think it's kind of the heart of the story is, I was visiting with one of my teachers the other day that's taken this on and embraced it, and she mentioned kind of the transformation that's happened in her class, even so much that there was a student that was the typical push the boundaries, push the limits of a kid and wanting them to even be in class. There was a frequent flyer runner, and that student was actually feeling ill one day and was working with the principal to go home, and told the principal that I'm not going home until after I go to science class. And the reason why I share that story is that's the experience that we want to give our kids on a individual student basis. But I think we've got to find out how to leverage those teachers that have figured out how to produce that environment in their class and be able to replicate that. I'm fortunate that I have this teacher because she's now an ambassador for this, and she's wanting to share and talk and communicate with other teachers. She's in my elementary STEM endorsement course, and she's personally got everybody in the entire course to believe what she does because of who she is. And I think we have every district has some of those or multiples of them, and if we could figure out how to leverage them, and whether it's filming them and getting in their classrooms and getting testimonials and whatever else, but more importantly, if we could figure out how to get them to each other would be even better. So I don't know if that's some brainstorming on what that looks like. It'd be cool if we could find some funding to pay for them, Ricky. You got money. I figured you did. So.
So I've heard people say a couple times, like, why doesn't the state just say, like, exactly, like, main way to go? So I feel like maybe, like, as I read through the notes, that if Davis is sending out a video to parents what it would look like, shouldn't that be something that's promoted to, like, all of our districts if you want to go that way? Like, do you guys want to set something up that's, like a state page that we refer to? It feels like it's in isolated chunks to me. Do you know what I mean? Not like it's not available, because you guys are really great to make it available, but there's no, like, we can't keep up with all the little things that are going on, you know? Making sense? Am I making sense?
T-shirts. We need T-shirts.
When we get the videos done, we'd be happy to give them to you guys. Could link them where you want to link them and everything. So if you did end up setting up a site, you'd be more than they'll be focused towards for our needs, but you guys would be welcome to link them wherever.
So looking at this, sorry, I stepped out and my meeting was quite short. She didn't want to come in. She's like, I know where they are. I don't need to go in there. I know what they want. It's like, all right. So we have some floating ideas. A big bus. I agree. Can we bring? I mean, a lot of these things, again, we need a consistent message. Great. We need to be the ones to create that message. We can't just leave it there. If that's what we want, we should be working on that. Do we have someone in here? If you like that, please put your name underneath that. Who is willing to work together to create a message, right? I mean, we need to get people to sign up for this, because what this looks like now is kind of what I said when I walked away. Don't leave me a list and now it's Ricky's job to figure it out. This is our work. As much as I like to be the voice and I like to try to help you as every way that I can, this is what we are doing as a whole. So please put near these things what it is that we want, that we can do, that you will do to support this. If you feel inadequate, you're like, I don't know what to do, but I'm interested in this idea. I would love to work with someone who could help me with that. Put your name there and start some networking on doing that for your LEA. I mean, that's where this needs to end. It can't just be a vague list of ideas. It needs to be something that we can cause to come to fruition, or else it's just going to be here and it's going to be done. What I like is the idea of maybe having some kind of a statewide email, right? I have a science teacher email list. Many of you are a part of it. Every Monday, it's sent out to everyone who signed up for it. I give you opportunities for teachers to go get PD and sign up for different types of opportunities all over the state and out of the state sometimes. What if we had either it's that list or one like it, where it's like, okay, here is this month's or this week's or this opportunity to move us forward in 3D science. Let's look at models, and we get together as a whole and we find anything and everything we can to help teachers with models. Maybe some of Tyson's videos, if any of you other have videos that you're willing and able to share with the masses of, look at what this looks like, a 5-minute, 2-minute, 3-minute, 60-second segment of a teacher explaining how modeling works in science. I don't know if you said this, Matt. I've said it a few times now, but there's a fishing analogy, and I've said it to a few. I like it. I'm going to use it because I like it. Some of you I've said this to already, but I'm going to say it to the whole group. We need to teach teachers to fish, right? We can't just say, here's what you teach. Here's the problem. With these 3D science, we have a lot of teachers that don't know what the fish looks like. We don't know what it tastes like. They don't know where to find it. So if we just say, here's some stuff, go, and they don't know what it looks like, we aren't getting any further. But if we provide videos of teachers doing this, they can say to themselves after seeing it, I can do that. Or maybe here's a place I can go that gives them a better description of what this looks like in a classroom. That's what we're talking about. Now, in order to do this is not something that I will be able to do on my own. I don't have access to classroom. I don't have access to videos. I need your help. So what if we take some time, if we move forward with that idea, that there's a specific email that goes out that helps teachers and administrators and parents say, are your kids modeling? Are your kids asking questions? What are you doing in your class or in your home, in your classroom, to get kids thinking in the idea of structure and function? Specifically looking at a cross-cutting concept, whatever, but we need to tear this apart and give these resources and make them available. Whether that ends up eventually being a website that they can go to get it, great. But it's something. The other thing is something that came to my mind as well that I didn't check to see if it's there. A way to get teachers involved with one another that has become quite beneficial to some is what's called a Twitter chat. Have any of you ever participated in one of those? Raise your hand if you have. 2, 3, 4. A Twitter chat is simply a way you get everyone on Twitter at the same time. You set a date, you set a time. You say, today our focus is going to be looking at how modeling, I keep using that as an example, but it's come to my mind, how modeling is working in your classroom. All these teachers see this because you use the same hashtag. I know we're using technical jargon for some of you. What's a hashtag? No, hopefully you know, but if not, whatever. But we use the hashtag, whatever we want it to be, and we give teachers an opportunity to get together every week to have a discussion at home, or maybe it's right after school. Maybe we schedule it for the 4 to 5 o'clock hour. I don't know, whenever we decide to do it. But that's another option, something that we can get off the ground with little resources, with little funding, and simply is going to take a bit of someone's time. I could do the first one, and then someone else can volunteer. All it is, if you've never experienced it, just so you know, Thursday nights, when's Utah Ed Chat? Is that Thursday, I think, at 9? There's one every time where Utah teachers from all over the place, someone facilitates the conversation, they ask questions, and teachers come in and they respond together. Now, you're seeing everyone else's responses because you're all using the same hashtag. And when they're done, you come up with not only networking, what is this teacher doing? I like how you think, we should get together and work. Boom, we have a connection. Teachers are being supported. But you get ideas of building this, and you're building capacity, you're building ideas. Again, these are great ideas, but if we don't give specifics to them, they're just going to be here.
So you just want to put my name down.
Thank you, Larry.
Whatever, and my email.
So what I would like for you to do, hopefully everyone has access to a computer to see this, get on here and find where you want to participate, where you want to contribute. And then find some time to work together on this. If you want me to be involved, let me know. Ricky, we would love for you to be here. When can you meet with us? I don't know, but there's something that we need to do to get together to move this forward. Matt, you can put your name by the t-shirts.
Okay, I'm in.
Oh, and Max too? Max wants t-shirts as well. But again, if we're just giving t-shirts out, I mean, how cool would it be if we I don't know, participants in presenting, if there's a teacher that's the one who's willing to share a video, thank you for participating. Here's a t-shirt. You're a great teacher. We could find funding for t-shirts. They're cheap. Right? I don't know if you even want t-shirts.
Want t-shirts.
I have removable tattoos that have the 3 dimensions. Look up here. Yeah, you can have one. You can put it on your forehead if you want. I think I'd be impressed if you put it on your forehead. Larry, I would look good on your forehead. Anyway, so we have a couple minutes left with this. Find where you are. Find how you can help out. Another idea that just came to my mind too is, again, a lot of districts have after-school opportunities if they're getting their teachers together. If you could simply just reach out to other, whether they're charters or whether they're other districts nearby, and just invite them to come. I mean, you won't be able to pay them, you won't be able to support them financially, but if they can get themselves there, make sure that all those options are available. So what are we doing to share those? Is there a place we can put together maybe a list that, okay, if you're in this area at this school at this time, we are talking about this. Anyone's welcome to come.
I'm a big believer of wiki pages. I use them. I'd be glad to set up a wiki page. If people would send me information of what's going on, I would post it. The only thing about the wiki page is, you have to access it. I guess I could send it to you. I've done this before in other places. I do it for my own classes and stuff, but that way, if you want to know who's doing what, it's kind of like in scouting. You want to know who's doing, merit badge clinic or whatever else. If you have a clearinghouse, and I would be glad to put together, if you guys send it to me, I'll make it available to everybody.
Okay, that'd be great.
So that's why I've signed up under, and it would help me because we're a lot of charter schools, we just don't have the resources. We are trying to figure it out on our own. It would be helpful if we could piggyback on a lot of what the districts are doing.
And I will say there are a lot of districts that are in the same boat that are trying to figure it out themselves, no matter how big or small they are. They're all doing their own things. So what great things you're doing, let's share them. Okay, please take some time with that. Don't expect something from me. If you are the only one signed up there, then figure out what you can do or work with me to figure something out. If there are multiple people, contact each other. What can we do? Let's move this forward. Next time we meet at SSECC, I said too many S's, SSECC will be in November, I believe. So we'll follow up and see how that's going. And maybe have some time for each of us to share what we're doing and what's going on and what the next steps are. But again,
can we get a list of the participants and their emails that are at this meeting, or is that something you can't let us know?
Yeah, so I mean, you have access again to the SSECC. I mean, if you want to contact SSECC and you have something you want to share with them, we have a mailing list. Everyone who is here and available, and everyone who's not is on that list. So we can easily share with each other those pieces.
Okay. Ricky, what's the date in November, please?
Oh, yeah, great question. Good night. Put me on the spot. Next on Friday, you mean? Between 9 and 12. I'm number 7. So I said anytime between 9:30 and noon in the morning. It is, oh, never mind. It's not November. Our next one's in January.
January 12th.
January 12th is our next meeting. We don't have a meeting in November. My bad. Okay. Moving on. The next thing on our agenda is to look specifically at instructional materials. Really quick, as a quick background, before I invite my friend Alan up to come talk to us. Every year we get groups of teachers that come together, volunteer teachers that look at materials that have been created, generally by publishers. They're purchasable materials. And every year they submit to a instructional materials specialist here at our office. They submit their materials for review. In the past, our review system has simply been, for science at least, has been, does it align to standards, yes or no? And then they decide whether it is or not. If it does meet the requirements of our rubric, that it meets standards, it's put into a RIMS system. That's the recommended instructional materials system. Now, looking at this, content in books and in resources alone is not enough, especially when we were talking about with these new standards. So it's time for us to review and re-look at the rubrics that we're having teachers look at in these meetings to make sure that these materials are sufficient for the needs of our classrooms. Alan Griffin is the instructional materials specialist here at the Utah State Board of Education. He is the one who runs these meetings. He works really closely with us specialists here to make sure that these rubrics are up to our standards. I've asked him to come in and give a little bit of information about this process and share what he's passed around is this document here, which is kind of some ideas that he came up with for these this rubric. You'll notice at the top again on the shared notes in this section under science instructional materials, there's a link to this document. So we'll go there in a bit. But Alan, do you want to come up here? Do you want to borrow my mic?
Thank you. I don't want to take very long because one of my goals is to simplify the process and yet to get a very much better quality review than we've been doing in the past. That doesn't mean our reviews have been bad. Our reviews continually get better. But for those of you who come and help us review materials, you know that sometimes it can be a rather time-consuming process. And because we have so many different individuals reviewing, everybody looks at it with a little different perspective, and sometimes our reviews are scattered around in kind of the style that they're written in. So what I've thought to do is take a rubric, and what you see in front of you actually is in rubric form, although you don't see the grid. I've got the instructional materials review statements. and we're reviewing them in 3 general areas. The first area is content, and that's the one that probably is the most important, in which you go through and you analyze the material in comparison with the state core standards. The second area is accessibility, wherein we look to see that the material really is designed to meet the needs of all students and is free from bias and those kinds of things. And the third area on the back side of that is pedagogy, and this means that what kinds of teacher assistance or helps are available. Materials come to us in a lot of different styles and fashions, and sometimes it's a little difficult to review them. And I've tried to make it as simple as I can with this just 3 groups of questions. And actually, there's only 10 questions on here. Under content, you have alignment, scaffolding, and navigation. And what we're wanting to do is to go through and look at these statements under alignment, for example. The top statement would correspond to a rating of 4 on a typical rubric. The next statement would be a 3, the next statement would be a 2, next statement would be a 1. So you have kind of a 1 to 4 rating scale, but it's just listed by statements. And what happens is this form is online. You'll pull it up and you'll decide which of those statements best meets the area of alignment. You select one of those statements, it will take that statement and immediately write it into the review. So you don't have to compose a big statement about the alignment. It's already there for you. It just sticks it in. Okay? And then same thing on scaffolding and navigation. So you've really got 3 questions under content. You go through and check the box of the one that you think fits the best, and it sticks it into the review. It creates a review for you. There is a section that's not listed on that sheet, but actually before you get to the word accessibility, there's a section there for user comments. This is where you get the opportunity to customize and to create your own statements that you think maybe describe the section on content. Then you go through the accessibility section. You look to see if it's free from bias, if it's adaptable, and if it meets technical standards. And then once again, there will be a box for comments, user comments, before you hit the section on pedagogy. And then you have that final section on pedagogy. This was designed as a general template, and each area again has that place for comments from you as the reviewer. But what we wanted to do is make it slick and efficient so that you pull up this thing online, you click the boxes, it creates a review, and then you can enter your own comments, and those comments will be included in the review as well. Now, we tested this out just yesterday for the first time, and I was really pleased with it, and I'm showing you here an example on the second page of one of the reviews that was created yesterday, okay? What they did is they went through and checked the boxes, it created the review, and then we took the review and just posted it, we copied it into RIMS. So this is a RIMS listing, and you can see it's got the content area, and you can see the statements that were selected by the user, and the narrative. The narrative is their own composition, okay? So it gives you the opportunity to explain or to facilitate, do anything else you think you need to do to explain your review. But one of the things it's doing, I think, is going to be really good is it makes the review faster. You know, you can go through, select the statements, it'll create for you, you can add your own comments, and you're done. I mean, it does it in a simplistic way, but hopefully we're reaching the real ideas that you want people to evaluate by, okay? And again, we try to tell the reviewers, you're writing this review for teachers and for specialists who are trying to adopt a textbook. Always keep that in mind. This review is for them. So the criteria that's on this list, hopefully, is criteria that is interesting to people who are trying to adopt the textbook. And when I say textbook, please remember that's a very loose term these days. We're not just talking about printed textbooks, we're talking about digital materials and online materials as well. So they're all there. Now, my form is pretty general. And several of the specialists have said, well, I'd really like to add some particular things about our particular subject area. And I think that's what Ricky wants to talk to you about. I'm happy to take any of your comments, and if you want to create a different section, if you want to add some additional statements, if you will let me know in a timely fashion, I will create that and put it online so that when you come to the review, check the boxes, run through it. It makes it very efficient and somewhat uniform. I mean, all the reviews are going to look like this, and when you go through RIMS again, you can look and say, well, gee, I wonder if it had scaffolding, what their rating on scaffolding was. And you can look in there and see, well, okay, there's the scaffolding section. Here's where it is. So just give that to you. We appreciate all of you who come to help us review, and we invite many of you to come. We're always happy to have new people come and help us review. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to Ricky and have him discuss this with you. And if you have some suggestions, if you have some ideas, get them to me. I'm happy to incorporate them, and we'll get them going. Thank you.
Questions for Alan? Perfect. So here's our job. You have this paper in front of you. 3 main sections: content, accessibility, pedagogy. Thinking of a science material, whether it's online, whether it's digital, whatever it is, what is this lacking? What would you like to see when you are reviewing materials? What should be there? Now, let me tell you again, when in the past, what we gave them in the past was a checkbox with every single standard and indicator, and they had to look through to see that the standard was there. That was it, looking specifically and only for content. Not as effective anymore. Now, as much as we want to make sure that's there, that's one section. It aligns to content. Great. But what else is there? So, what I would like you to do is, if you haven't already, if you click on the link here at the top on the shared notes, it's the tinyurl.com/IMR rubric. IMR rubric. You click on that, and here is this exact document in a Google form format that you can actually make changes to. What I would ask is that when you get into it, in the top right corner where it says editing mode, change from editing mode to suggesting mode. And that way what you can do is you can make whatever change you want, and it will track those changes for us in there. Now, I don't want to go through this as a group one at a time. I think for the most part, I like what's there. I think he has a pretty good start, but what is missing for a science textbook? That's where I would like for each of you to take a bit of time, whether we work in small groups of 2s or whether we work as a whole. Maybe we should, you know what, this is 2s. Let's go as a whole. Let's talk. What are some things that you would want to see as there? Now, I'm also going to add to this because I'm seeing faces on people. Understand, Utah, one more time, local control. We have no say in what you do in your classrooms as a whole. But many years back, this was put together so because people were like, well, what do you suggest? What do you recommend? So we said, okay, we can put together recommended things. That was the purpose of this RIMS database in the beginning. Now, some of you say to yourself, well, we don't use any of that. We don't use textbooks, or maybe all we use is textbooks. So some of you, this may not help you very much because of how you do your own work. But still, because the system is placed, we want to make it as efficient as possible. So looking in the realm of content, we have alignment, scaffolding, navigation. Is there anything content that you wish was in this section that we would need to create?
I want to know, is anybody going to adopt that?
Matt asked if anyone's going to adopt a text for those in the online world. The answer is no. Understand, though, that this also are things, we don't just get textbooks here. FOSS kits, they went through this process. Every one of those FOSS kits came through our doors, and someone had to check them. So it's not just textbook. This is curriculum. This is everything that wants to be into the system that people are trying to sell to your districts. Now, whether, again, you will use this system or not, we still need to make sure it's there because it's the system that we have in place here.
Is this across the board, or is this something that you're running like specific science?
This is one just for science.
Because the one thing I would say that's missing out of here right off the bat is there's nothing about alignment to the vision in terms of 3D science. And so that's the biggest thing that I found with vendors that drives me crazy, is that they slap terminology and words all over stuff, but they don't actually get at the true purpose of it all. And so something about that under content would be great, but also something with that under pedagogy in terms of instructional supports and also supplemental resources.
Where would you see it fits best?
I think it should be in all three of those places. That under the content, it should be aligned not just to the standards, but also to the 3D science model. And then in pedagogy, instructional support a 3D science pedagogy or something along those lines. And also under supplemental resources that are linked out to also take teachers to those kinds of sources and not just to, I don't know. That's my whatever.
Okay. Will you add some of that to that? Not just put bullets, but what else? That's the biggest thing I was thinking, right? Before NGSS was even adopted, it wasn't finalized yet. There were publishers that put a sticker on all of their books and we're aligned to NGSS. Friends of mine at Achieve that wrote NGSS love to go to conferences with cease and desist letters saying, we don't have this, you don't have this, you need to take these stickers off now. What I'm saying is that publishers sometimes are in the market of making money and they say things. We want to produce some kind of a rubric that, again, there's going to be an administrator in the state of Utah that says, oh, look, this is aligned to, because there'll be publishers that actually say this is aligned to seed. They will say that. And if all they go off of is it's aligned to seed, they need to have something in place. Say, well, what does RIM say? And we could be the ones to have something that says for these people, specifically, it says it aligns to seed, however, X, Y, and Z. What? Say it.
I know I've been reviewing documents. So I feel like there's no resources out there yet that are phenomenon-based that I've seen, other than mystery science for elementary schools. That's the one phenomenon-based resource that I have found so far.
So one thing we could do, by the way, with this rubric, perfect, but or we don't recommend them, because not all LEAs will use this. But if we as a whole, I mean, we are the leaders in science education in the state of Utah. If we as a whole feel that there does not exist any curriculum that hits what we hope it would, then we should make sure that in our section we have no recommended resources. And what happens is people that don't get the recommendation, they get an email back saying you were denied because of this, this, and this. And you know what they do? They want to make changes to fit it. So it gives them the feedback also to make changes. One thing, again, working with I get emails all the time from different types of publishers and people that want to make money in education by creating resources. And it's the same thing. A lot of them say they're aligned to NGSS because they use the word cross-cutting concept once or twice, or structure and function, or because they mention things. But it's still the same stuff they've had for the last 20 years. Paul?
Ricky, I'm not sure if people out there know about phenomena-based stuff, because the word phenomenon is not present in the seed packet that you gave us. It's not there. And I don't know how to educate publishers about phenomenon unless phenomena unless we send it out to them.
I think we can direct people back to the framework.
If they're reading it, if they're trying to look for it.
So, and again, it's simply a repackaging of something that they've had in the past is what the issue is. And they say, well, look, we've done this and now. So I agree. I mean, maybe our rubric simply says does not include phenomenon-based understanding, C, and then it has a little thing that shows up. See this part of the framework that describes phenomenon-based understanding. Go here to get more information. Maybe it could be something that simple, but this is simply for publishers.
Ricky, can your office look at New York, Oregon, California that are full NGSS? And I'm sure they're putting together phenomena-based recommended books in those states where they actually use the dirty word NGSS.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, we don't look for them. These are people that submit them to us. So yeah, I mean.
Well, then an easy litmus test, are they approved in those states? Because those are states that they have full-time paid committees and they're experiencing full roll-up, particularly New York. They're now in their third year. I would imagine they have people there that are in direct conversation with Prentice Hall and the other publishers. And if they're not, if these publishers aren't getting approved in states like that, I would say that's a pretty, it hasn't passed the test for Utah.
Right. Okay. Good.
So in terms of phenomena, I just want to quickly add a little information. Currently, Weber State is working with the California State University. We kind of have about 10 universities together try to introduce NGSS aligned pedagogy. We teach that in our teaching method course. And the across-board issue we had is very few people know what is a phenomena. And even fewer people know what is a good teachable phenomena, because many phenomena are there in the natural world, but not all of them are teachable. So we need to identify the phenomena that's really good to be used in the classroom. So that's a challenge for many teachers. So if we just say, oh, we want phenomena-based curriculum, it does not mean the phenomena picked by some people will be kind of applicable for all the classroom. So that's something I want to add here.
Thank you. Okay. Seeing is that no one is adding into this, I have a feeling that we're just not taking this on. So I'm going to move on. Did you type them in? I don't see them, but maybe I'm not updated. Okay. I typed that. So anyway, all righty. Let's close this out. We're going to do a bit of a quick run. Again, like I said before, I'm going to try to move as much away as possible in this meeting being a sit and get information. There's always stuff that I'd like to share with you, but I just want to keep it simple. And the stuff that really could be moved into an email, I want to kind of like breeze through it. On our wrap-up stage, this is kind of our quick run. First up, we want to quickly talk about SAGE assessments. There are plenty of rumors going around your LEAs because they get to us that this year's SAGE test for 6th, 7th, and 8th grade does not align to the current standards. They align to old standards. This is a flat-out lie that someone has created. I don't know where they're getting this. This is not true. As of right now, we have 86 clusters for 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. Clusters being, that's the format of the new items. Each cluster is phenomenon-based and has 3 to 6 individual questions. In the new format of this test, students will only get 8 to 10 clusters on the test. And we have about 80. We have way more than we need, plenty to move forward. They're now going through bias and sensitivity review. They will be ready for publishing, and they'll be available for teachers to be using come the spring when testing starts. So please, if you ever hear this, you need to curb it immediately. We will be testing in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade on a phenomenon base. There's that word again. phenomenon-based way in the classroom. There's great research that came out of the University of Kansas that looked at three-dimensional and summative assessments. They showed that teachers that just teach, they say generally speaking, a kid can guess 25% of the questions right. It showed this same kind of guessing of sorts with teachers that just taught content on this new form of testing, and it was significantly lower than 25% guessing if all they taught is content. However, if the teachers teach content and practices, it goes up a bit. If they never focus on cross-cutting concepts, they just do 2 of the 3 dimensions, it's up a bit from that, but still not at 25%. If they just do content and cross-cutting concepts and never do science, I don't know how you would do that in the classroom, but somehow they were able to tease this out of data. It's a little bit more. Cross-cutting concepts and reasoning skills help, I guess. I don't know. But in the classrooms where 3 dimensions are taught all together, kids that guess their way through it are, I want to say it was pretty significant. I don't remember the numbers, but if you, Scott has the data and the research paper that he got this from. But so teachers in your schools that are still teaching content in the way they always have, their kids will be at a less than 25% chance of guessing their way through it. Even worse than what it was before. But teachers that do it in a 3-dimensional way and teach all 3 dimensions, they're doing better than 25% guessing their way through it. Just because in their classroom experience, they were doing all these things.
Ricky, the number that from his research, that research was 75%.
Okay, thank you.
So really high.
So again, kids that are guessing but have been working in practices and cross-cutting concepts because they can do those things are guessing through the content at a 75% accuracy. Which I don't know if I trust that. That seems really high. But again, if your kids can reason, if your kids can do the science, that's really what we're assessing now. These standards are 1/3 content, 1/3 doing science through practices, and 1/3 reasoning through cross-cutting concepts. If they have the practices and the reasoning skills down, 66% of the way is done. They can reason through this test. And that's how we're writing it. So another thing to add, there'll be no interim or benchmark tests. Scott does have some updates that he emails out. He has an email address if you would like to sign up for his listserv to get information about updates with Sage, tinyurl.com/Seed Sage email. And if you want to see some sample items, yes, there are 2 available for you to look at if you haven't already. He presented on those in a previous SSCCC meeting. But you can see what the questions are actually going to look like in the cluster if you go to that link below, Sage items. Next, shifts in online endorsement courses. You probably saw the email that came from me that we are, after this fall, are no longer offering the free online online endorsement courses that we've been offering for the last 5 years. This happened mostly because there was no way to keep a teacher enrolled. There was no way for us to dock them for canceling out early because they had no stake in the game. So what we would have is a class of 30 teachers full with 20 plus in backup on the wait list. But by week 4, 15 of the 30 had dropped. And by that time, it was too late to add anyone from the wait list. And by the end of the class, we'd have anywhere literally 3 to maybe 8 completing the course. It was not sustainable. The funding got dropped. So what we were able to do is shift the courses. So now what I wanted to do at least is say, okay, let's make them pay money up front. If they complete it, they get their money back. There was no system in place through our state office to be able to collect money, even if we were giving it back. So the option is now, because the money's gone, there's no way we're getting it back, is to go through USTA. USTA is now offering these courses at $400 a piece. They're the same courses, but that money is just enough to pay for the facilitator of the course. And that $400 also includes getting the money posted to a transcript as well. Usually after the completion, you would pay for that money to post to a transcript. That pays for it. So that's where that's going. They have a lot of other ideas and things they want to do with that, but that's still to be seen in the future. They're excited about having these as a resource, and they're going to try to work with SUU to maybe create some kind of build these up to be even bigger than they are. So we're excited for them. Next is USTAR. Award letters, for those of you that are getting USTAR funding, there is a huge delay in our accounting system to getting award letters out to you. My understanding is it just got finished last week. So with that, you can now start asking for reimbursements. If you or the award letter should be going to superintendents, curriculum directors, or possibly the business managers. Whoever's on file in our system to get that. No one else gets it. So I plan on emailing those out as well. The first quarter reimbursement, the way it was set up in the RFP is because we had so many people that did not submit a single request for USTAR reimbursement until fourth quarter. That does not look good, by the way, when we don't ask for the money that we have coming in. Now we have quarterly requests. There has to be a minimum of a quarterly request coming in. And if a quarterly request doesn't happen, there's a possibility your allotments drop 25% because we're assuming you're not using it. So you need to work with your financial people to get reimbursements in at least quarterly. It doesn't have to be a quarter of it. It just has to be something. That first date, by the way, was set for September 15th. We didn't make that because the award letters weren't out by that time. So I've extended the first quarter deadline to October 31st. We will do a quarterly review of who has and has not submitted. We will give them a warning at first saying you have not submitted a first quarter reimbursement. If we don't see one by this date, you will lose funding in your allotment. It needs to happen more regularly because what happens with this money is legislature looks at it. Generally, they run the report in January for March's legislative season. And what happens is they say, wow, this $6.2 million isn't being used. Right now, only 1 million of that 6.2 is being used and the year's almost up. They don't need this. And that's why every year USTAR comes up with something they can cut because it doesn't look like we're using it. You have to ask for reimbursements. Next, PAMST. Yes.
So I only make semester, like I wait till the end of a semester before I give my teachers their stipends. And how do I can't ask for money that I haven't already allocated and given out.
So suggestion, well, it shouldn't be a stipend. It should be coming out on an hourly rate every month.
Until I get their monthly reports to see what.
Okay. On those kind of individualized things, we can work with you. So just if that's a problem in your LEA and that's how you do it, I don't want to force you into a system you're not using. So we'll work together. Just let me know. Yep.
Our first request will include this summer's programming and whatever up to this
Yes, everything up to this point. So the question was, does this include everything up to this point? The answer is yes. Presidential awards. This year's review for the presidential awards is for elementary teachers. If you have outstanding elementary teachers, the nominations are now open. Get them nominated. Get them working into this program. The presidential award is a wonderful, almost, it's a professional development in a way as they are going through this process of recording themselves and reviewing how they're teaching and how things are working in their classrooms. Nominate teachers and let me know as well. I get an email from who's been nominated and who doesn't. But what we find a lot of the times, it's the ones that get the support. I have money, I have a budget from the National Science Foundation who runs this program to supply mentors to teachers who are trying to go through this program for the first time. I have no idea what they're doing, and it's pretty overwhelming. Let me know. We can get them in contact with finalists from the past or award winners, and we can get them in contact with them to kind of help them put together a good video or to write their written analysis for this. But it's a great opportunity. We want as many people as possible involved in this. Another thing that I'm going to say is, as well, is that, well, no, I'll just leave it there. Last, USTA conference. This is it. The USTA conference is coming up on November 9th in Provo again. If you have teachers that are interested in going to this. So I said November? That's not right. February. No, it's not USTA. No, I wasn't. I don't agree with that.
Okay, well, I got switched.
Supposedly USTA has now changed their abbreviation to UTSTA, but that's never going to stick, so I'm going to continue to call them USTA. Anyway,
Josh said he is an adult.
Yeah. Anyway, February 9th at the Provo Marriott. If you have teachers that are interested, get them signed up soon. Get them working with their principals now. Generally, principals will support teachers to go to this kind of stuff if they know early enough in advance, because especially early enough, there's still money. So get them going on the online notes. There's also a flyer if you would like to print one out and put it around your schools and give them to teachers. It's available for you there. Folks, that's all I got for you. Deadline for presentations is, I want to say, the 15th of October. We hope to get back to you by the beginning of November. This year, I am not completely in charge as I have in the past for the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade strands. What that means is we're just looking for teachers that have great lessons that they have created for the new SEED standards in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade that they share. So if you know you have teachers that have great things that they do, they want to get out, have them register for a presentation. But that's our plan, is to get ideas out for that. That wasn't quick at all. That took like 10 minutes.
I understand on that USTA is paying for half the fee and also for an assistant.
Right. So this year, for people whose presentations, who apply to do a presentation and are accepted to present, they, and if they have an additional presenter, the first 2 presenters at that will get half off of their registration fees.
And know that we are looking for 3-dimensional. We do want 3-dimensional presentations. So if you want to present, please make sure you're very clear on your alignment to the 3D approach.
And we're looking for 3D, and I say we because I get to sit in on that board as well. I'm not a voting member, but I get to be there. We are looking for 3D in all levels. If you know of a teacher that does chemistry right now in a 3-dimensional way, we would love to see what they're doing, because chemistry teachers would love to see that as well. So that's a great thing. What's the cost this year, Ashley? Well, let's go to the site.
I think it's 70. It's still cheaper than a lot of conferences.
Is it possible to add that to the flyer and then
Yeah, we can do that. It is
Where is it?
$80 before January 15th.
Ah, there it is. $80, right? Okay. Folks, thank you for all you do. I appreciate you being here. I appreciate your time. I hope that this was worth your attendance. Again, in the future, the hope is that everything that comes to this body are action items, things that we are working on, things that we are doing. So if you can think of things that you want us to work on in the future, please get those to me. Our next meeting is in January. I hope to have an agenda out at least a month before then. So please, 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 if there are things that you want us to talk about and work on, get them to me, because I want to do what you need. Obviously, there are things that I brought up that, for example, instructional materials, that you looked at me like, nope, I don't care. And I'm like, deal, check that one off. So again, if there are things you need, let me know so we can work on those things. Thank you so much.